Ms. DePlaine, I just wanted to make sure you can hear us before we get our meeting started.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you get, we good? 5, yeah. Awesome. Okay. I wasn't ready for that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our regular meeting and public hearing of the Litchfield Governing Board. Today is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023, and I officially call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we could all please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we're going to take a moment of silent reflection. Okay, before we move on to our recognitions and presentations, I did want to state that Ms. Moran, one of our board members, will be joining us via Zoom. She is not currently on the meeting as she had a prior commitment, but as soon as she gets on, our tech people will let me know so we can let everyone know that she's joined the meeting. But next on the agenda is our recognitions, and this is going to be led by Director Nuanez.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, and our esteemed guests tonight. You know, they're known by many names in this district: PTA, PTSA, PTO, and we do have one booster club. And I'm still learning the differences between all of them. But what I have learned is really there is not much difference other than in the names. It takes these special people to dedicate their time as parents to support their respective schools. They take a lot of time to fundraise. They're doing fun runs, they're organizing, they're engaging their communities, they're engaging their parents. But most of all, what all this engagement does is it creates a sense of community that creates togetherness, creates support. And I think with that in mind, creates a stronger school and a stronger learning community for all of our students. So tonight, we're here to recognize and celebrate all of our parent organizations with whatever label that you do carry. But know that we appreciate you, your schools appreciate you, and most of all, we at the district level truly appreciate all that you do, and we celebrate you. If I could have you come up here and we'll take a quick picture, or we can take you in your groups and we'll have take a quick picture with Governing Board President and Superintendent Gunning. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, we'll do them separate. Yeah. We'll do our rancho. Verado Heritage. Palm Valley. Do we have Dreaming Summit in the house? I think I see Litchfield Elementary. One small little tidbit about Litchfield Elementary School is they've accomplished the building of a playground that has been 8 years or more in the making. So congratulations. Did we get everybody? Is there anybody else? I think that's everybody. How about another round of applause for all of our kids here?
Before we move on, I just want to take a minute to thank these parent leaders that are here tonight and the ones that are not here tonight, because we know that there are parent leaders at every single one of our campuses. Schools cannot do it alone, and these parents work their butts off, not paid, making sure that our kids have the extra fun things that they need, extra supplies for the teachers. This week, they're also working their butts off for Teacher Appreciation Week, or last week, if your school did it last week, to make sure that our teachers know how much we love and appreciate them every day. And we try to give them a special week every year. And we have PTAs and PTSAs as PTOs that do special things throughout the year for the teachers to make sure that they feel valued. So I, as a parent, a former parent, leader myself, that's how I got up here. So just so y'all know, parent leaders, you could be up here someday. I appreciate you. We all appreciate you. So thank you so much for all that you do for our kids and for our teachers every day. Give them another round of applause, everybody. We are going to move on to our next item on the agenda. Now, I understand some people that are here for our recognitions maybe need to get going because they've got kids at home or we're teaching tomorrow morning. So it will not hurt our feelings if you walk out. Feel free to play the YouTube video while you're driving home, or turn it on when you get home if you really want to listen to our really fun meeting we're going to have tonight. But we thank you all for coming, and you all have a great night that have been here. Thank you. I'll give them just a second to walk out. Okay, so next up on our agenda, we are going to convene our public hearing pursuant to ARS 15-905 to review the fiscal year 2023 budget revision number 3. I call that to order now. We will be having a presentation by Executive Director Michael Vaughn.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, colleagues, and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the district's budget revision for fiscal year 22-23. Arizona revised statute requires that school districts revise their budget based on actual activity by May 15th each year. During this budget revision, it's common for school districts to update student count estimates as well as better align budgeted amounts with areas of expected spending. During this budget revision, the district was able to recognize anticipated funding from a little over 10 additional students since the last budget revision, and to adjust student weighted count based on weights provided for various students based on specific individual characteristics such as special education categorization. These changes in average daily membership and weighted student count are increasing the M&O budget by a little over $300,000. The district is also aligning the amount of the M&O override to updated figures published by the state. In total, this budget revision increases the M&O budget by a little over $400,000. The changes in the budget are primarily being shifted to special education and transportation. In special education, this is due to an increase in the expected cost of our contracted employees over what was reflected in previous budgets. In transportation, the increase is to reflect updated estimates on our cost for staffing and contracted transportation services for the year, both for transportation related to special education, private day school placements, and contracting of more traditional transportation routes. Looking at the budget revision by type of spending, we see a consistent story. Overall, the budget revision shifts resources to contracted services from salaries and benefits. Similar to the maintenance and operations funds, unrestricted capital outlay revenues are driven by student count. However, unlike the maintenance and operations fund, the capital fund is driven by prior year student count numbers. As a result, we do not have a change in this revision for the student counts generating capital revenues. In this revision, we do recognize an additional $384 in expected capital revenues based on an increased estimate by the state for Proposition 123 funding. Our capital budget is broken up between facilities improvements and replacements, furniture, equipment and vehicles, and textbooks, library books, and instructional materials as shown on the slide. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you might have about the proposed budget revision.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you for the presentation.
Mr. Honak,
No, very clear. Thank you.
Mr. Owens,
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Moran?
No questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions either. So yay. Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any public comments? No? So, okay. Then I need a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
I move to adjourn the public hearing and return to the regular meeting.
Second.
Having a first and a second, I will go through the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran.
Yay.
Also a yay, so motion passes. We are now back into our regular meeting where we will move into presentations. Our first presentation is going to be from CESO Communications Survey presentation. This is going to be by Jim Cummings. Oh, hold on. Can we make sure you have the mic on so that
There we go.
our-
That better?
Perfect. Thank
Okay.
you.
I haven't done this in a while, so forgive me. My name is Jim Cummings. I'm a senior strategist with CISO Communications. And just a little bit about me and our group is we are out of Minneapolis, but we serve schools and school districts in over 30 states. Personally, I'm the Arizona guy. I've been in Arizona for a long time now. And prior to doing this, I was the director of communications at 3 different school districts at Phoenix Union, at Peoria Unified, and at Glendale for, well, a long time, over 35 years, probably older than most of the parents who just left. But one of the things we did, before I go further though, I just want to take the opportunity, I'd be remiss in not congratulating Superintendent Gunning on her retirement. We were speaking earlier, you never really retire, she'll be back somewhere or another, but also to congratulate Dr. Davidson on coming up. So tonight's presentation, as you can see, we're going to just do 4 quick things. I've been asked to keep it fairly brief, so we're going to give you the nuts and bolts of what we did in this communications study. First will be an introduction, then we'll present you with the results, some next steps, and then if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer. The genesis of this came, we've been working with Litchfield now for the better part of a year. And the genesis for this study came about through what we call our baseline communications assessment. And then part of that was after we developed that assessment, we had to come out and do a strategic plan for you, a strategic communications plan. Well, one of the things we recommended through the baseline communications assessment was several areas in which you need to survey your community. Just like a teacher doesn't go into a classroom without information about their kids, communicators can't really do a great job unless they have information at their hands to speak to their various audiences. And so part of this became doing this study, and it was specific toward what types of communications people prefer, the methods they prefer to get it, and a couple of other things. So the survey itself took place, and it was among LASD parents, employees, and community members. And of course, it was done in both English and in Spanish. And it took place between November 28th and 2022 and December 31st, 2022 as well. So given the length of time that the survey was open, anyone who wanted to participate certainly had ample opportunity to do so. So participation levels were actually pretty astounding. And they came at us quick. When we opened the survey, within the first day, we had over 700 responses. And so we knew that we were in for a bit of a ride. But in the end, as you can see, we had 1,274 families respond to this and just over 250 employees. And these numbers, what this tells us is that these numbers are pretty solid. Most everybody stayed on. There are very few people who didn't finish the survey. It only took about 5 minutes. We timed that out. Most people stuck around for that long. They had just very few questions to answer and then a couple of broad-based questions. Now, the high level of participation is certainly an indicator to us that the district's communications team made a great effort to get the word out on this survey. And so people knew it was coming and they were ready for its launch. But more important, it tells you that people were concerned. It tells you that people have bought into the school. It tells you that people are bought in and feel part of the school district. Otherwise, they wouldn't participate in stuff like this. Now, the results varied from school to school. That's fairly typical. Larger schools are going to have larger participation levels. Some schools will, some schools won't. But there's nothing out of the ordinary in terms of the participation from the school level. But again, what is extraordinary is the total number of people who took part in this survey, particularly given the size of the school district. Now, who are these people? Well, as you can see, the vast majority of the people who took the survey are parents and families. Second to that are LASD employees, then community members, and then the none of the above are people who simply just didn't want to identify themselves. So they could be anyone. They could be grandparents, they could be community members, they even maybe be parents, but they're out there. And again, enough people to make a dent in the survey and want to tell us what's going on. So with staff, who was it? Well, the highest participation level came, and this is no surprise among those with 10 or more years of experience. That's fairly typical among these types of surveys. The more experienced teachers are, the more experience they've had in the district, the more opinions they have. And they know what's going on, so they want to talk about it. But you will find also that the second level that was folks with 5 years or more experience. And in this, a bit of an unusual twist, the third leading group were folks who were here for less than 1 year. That is a bit of an unusual twist, but that's a good thing to know because they want to know what's going on in their school district with their employer. And the fact that they're showing an interest in this is really critical, I think, and speaks well for the district. So who among the staff participated? Well, the vast majority of people who participated were teachers by a large percentage. And other than that, paraprofessionals leading and coming in third were what we classified as other. Those are people who just didn't fit into any of these particular categories. Could be bus drivers, could be cafeteria workers, could be people who just didn't feel that they fit into to any of these other categories. From the community perspective, we asked them how long they've been around here. And again, most of the respondents have been here for more than 10 years. And that makes sense because people who have lived here for a while, they're dug in. You know, this is their community. So they're very concerned with their schools and about their schools. So they're going to respond to this. And again, accordingly, you can just watch it go down. It's a pattern that's very clear that the less you've lived here, the less likely you were to have filled out the staff. Now, the other thing about the community that we asked them is, did you ever have kids in LASD schools? And you can see here that a vast majority of them have. They may not anymore. In fact, 3 out of 5 members of your community don't have kids in LASD schools or any other schools for that matter. So it's important to keep that in mind. But what this says and what makes this really important to us is that even though they no longer have children in your schools, they're still concerned about LASD. They're concerned about their kids, they're concerned about what's going on in their schools. And they're more than likely, if they participate in this, to participate in things like elections, overrides, bonds, and of course, election of the school board. So let's get to more of the results. And we're going to go from a district-based level and first, because this is really the bigger areas. We asked people what their most relied upon source was. And without question, it's emails. Now, there was concern a number of years ago that email was dying. You could read articles in business magazines and even communication magazines that email was dead. Email has sprung back to life quite quickly, and for good reason. People are inundated with information, but they do have control over their email address. They can sit there and tell you, do you want, can I have your email address? And we do this at stores and 1,000 other places, and 99 times out of 100, I say no. But when it comes to their child's school, they're not going to say no. So they're going to do that. So they know that the email that they're going to get from you, from the district, is something that's reliable. It's something that they want, and it's something that they want to receive as well. Second most along in there was the mass communication system that you had, phone calls, text messages, that type of stuff. Those work great, and everybody else just kind of came along. One of the things we saw was a high reliance on the district's website. And the way your website is formatted right now, you have the hubs at the very top right-hand side of the website, one for parents, for employees, and for community members. It's a very smart way to set up your website because parents know exactly where they need to go. Families, staff know exactly where they need to go to get the information that they need. The good news here is that very few folks rely on the news media for information, families, for information about their schools or their district. And we'll address that in a little bit because that opens up some opportunities for you, some really terrific opportunities. Other than that, the social media still plays a big role. I think most people kind of get in there, but you will see that a good almost 10% of people rely on district staff for information about their schools too. And we're going to address that a little bit later too, but that's not a bad thing. So now how do they prefer to get their information? Well, families prefer to get your email. That's what they want. They want to take a look at your email, whether it's an e-newsletter or information coming out from the district. That by and large is how they want to get their information. Coming a close second is the district website. So the work that Sam and his crew have been doing on the website over the course of the year has really been beneficial for the school district. We know that websites can be of two thoughts. One can be an information hub. The other can just be a marketing tool. We believe that you should do both, and that your out-facing pages should really concentrate more on marketing, bringing people in, not just parents, but employees into the school district. And because of the way you have it set up, again, referring back to the hubs, you're in a position to do that. And you've been slowly making that turn. Changing a website is a very time intensive and difficult thing to do on a day-to-day basis. But what's been done over the course of the last year is actually pretty remarkable. Some of the stuff is always concerning because people, well, what other stuff can we do? Well, some folks like written printed newsletters that they're tactile. They want to have it in their hand. Just like some of us, I still get the Sunday newspaper just so I can feel it. folks are like that. So the other places where they get information, by the way, though, are from your website, specifically the governing board website, where they read the agendas and they read the minutes of these meetings. Those are important to people. So among staff, again, email rules the day. This is how they prefer to get their information. Second to that would be their other district staff members. And again, we're going to address that in a little bit, but also on top of that is the district website. Again, they do not rely greatly on the news media. And as a school communications person, I cannot tell you how happy that makes me. Because again, we are in just a little bit, we'll talk about some of the opportunities that presents. One of the things though, and that we look at, since a lot of folks are talking to each other, that they're getting their information from fellow staff members, is internal communications. So the foundation of internal communications really is to provide staff with timely and accurate information. And so that becomes even more important when they're speaking to each other and exchanging information. One of the things you try to do as a communicator from the communications office is have your employees act as ambassadors on behalf of the school district. As we all know from the polling that comes out every year, teachers and principals are the most believed people walking the face of the earth. Everybody trusts may not trust their principal, but just about everybody trusts their teacher. And so to provide them with accurate and timely information is really critical to the district's mission. And again, the other comes into some people want a printed newsletter and some people just want, some people, they're kind of all over the board on that, but mostly it's a printed newsletter. So again, what's their the staff's preferred source? There is like, it's the email. And so this leads us, and we'll talk about this during the next steps on some of the things that you can do to take advantage of that. But again, the district website comes in there, social media, and phone calls. You will notice that what dropped off on this chart is other employees. And so they would rather not get their information from other employees. They're going to talk about, employees will talk to each other. They always do. We all like to gossip around the water cooler. So, they're going to talk to each other, but they would prefer to get the information someplace else. And in this case, it's directly from the district, the superintendent, via email. Now, we don't have a pretty chart for the community because so few members responded that these were just little smudges of color. So we just thought we'd tell you how they came across. And given that, again, the small number, it was less than 50 people, less than 50 community members who responded to this on whole, but they deserve their day in the sun too, right? So they also email rules the day. I'm not sure who's getting the email, but that's what they would prefer. And a lot of them do go to the district website. So again, the work that you're doing on that Sam's been doing on that is going to continue to have high importance. Social media is there. This group relies on the media a little bit more than what I would like to see. But you're not getting bad press either, so it's not killing you either. And the other, again, comes down to looking at your website, at your board agendas and minutes, as well as newsletters and that type of thing. So it's one thing to get the information out there. The other question is, how reliable is it? Well, this is where you should start celebrating because the news here is terrific. Across the board, you're in the 80% range, or either strongly agree on the accuracy, the timeliness, and the timeliness of the information that's coming from the district. That's a terrific number. As a school communicator, I would have killed for it. Because it's rare that you see numbers this high. Something's going right for you, and so you want to continue that. Is there room for improvement? There always is, but the question is how much. Where it gets a little bit less is down toward the bottom when we ask about whether or not they get enough advance notice from the district about things, and whether they get to participate in some of the tough decision-making that goes on at school districts. It's not as high, but still high. But what folks would like to do is, and we saw this in the comments, is that they'd like more advance notice about events and that type of thing going on. I think some of the calendaring stuff that you do currently on the website is pretty terrific. But it might be worth taking a look at if your schools are keeping up with those calendars too, because the vast number of of comments made in regard to this were in regard to not knowing events that are coming up because they want to attend. And it's not because they don't, they want to complain about it. They want to be there. They want to be there for their kids. So we go to the staff, and the staff is in the same range by and large for the most part. And again, it comes down to where things aren't as high. They're still high, but not as high. Or in the district does a good job of informing me of what's happening throughout the district. Again, this is more a function of calendar and of events than of anything else. And again, everybody wants to have some input in the decision-making at the district level. Ultimately, of course, that's up to the 5 people sitting, the 4 people sitting up front and the other one on the phone. But in the end, folks want to have a say in how their school district is run and in some of the matters that are going on. So a little bit more of community engagement won't hurt you. Although frankly, the district, Litchfield is legion for their community engagement especially among your opinion leaders. Around here, you've always done a terrific job with that, and that continues. But from a staff level and also from a parent level, they'd like to see that a little bit more as well. So from the community level, and again, remember when you take a look at these numbers that it was very few people who responded to it, so don't overreact to them. They still agree that the information that they get is timely, that it's accurate, and that they can trust the information. But again, they also would like to play a role in decision making, not as large a role as your families and as your staff, but still a role nonetheless. And they where it really kind of fell off the map was that the district does a good job of keeping me informed. Again, one of the things we looked at when we were doing our baseline communications assessment is the various audiences that you're communicating with. And the community at large is really an area and an audience that we think you're going to have to address a little bit more. This is a growing area. As I mentioned before, 3 out of 5 families, homes in this school district don't even have kids in school. Doesn't matter whether it's LASD or any of the high school feeder districts. They're just not there. And so that's something we're going to address and we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. Now, what information they're getting, they like, and they find it to be quite accurate. So now we're going to look at school-based communications. It's a little different than the district. This is what's coming out from the schools. And the only people who answered this question were the 1,200 families who participated in the survey. And again, once again, email rules today. They prefer to get emails from their principal. But the phone system and the notification system is also up there too. It's very high. And that's because I'm making an assumption that your principals use it in the right way. They're not sending out too many calls. You can do that. That the calls that they do send out are very important. But by and large, what they want to receive is they want to hear directly from the principal through email. But the other large number is the classroom newsletters. Teachers have an incredibly important role in communicating from school to home. Because it's one thing to get a school newsletter that's very important to folks, but it's another thing to get a newsletter or information from your child's teacher. That is the thing that they will rely on. And at the school level, you're doing a great job of that. And again, how's that coming out? What's the most preferred way? Again, email and the classroom newsletter. There is virtually no difference between this slide and the previous slide. So this is the way parents like to be communicated with at the schools, and your schools are doing a pretty good job of it. In fact, their numbers are way up there. They're way up higher than everybody else. Parents like what they're receiving. They think what they're getting is sent to them on a timely basis, that it's accurate. They trust the information, and that it's well organized and easy to understand, and that their school keeps them abreast of what's going on. So, and they also get high marks for engaging their parents as well in the decision making in the school. Not a surprise, given what we saw earlier during your celebrations with all the parent groups out here. Clearly, people are pretty involved in their schools as they want to be, as they should be, and as a lot of school districts hope that they are. So from the school level, we don't think you should do much of anything, because we think you're doing a pretty good job of that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? We'll have one recommendation for school level communications in just a little bit here. And so one of the things we were asked to take a look at is texting, because in the family section of the survey, we did ask people, when we talked about texting, it was in the context of the mass communication system, because that's the only way you can text everybody. And we agree that that's a powerful tool to use, but it also presents its own problems. There's limits to it. Number one, there's limits to the number of characters that you can use using your mass communication system. You can use more, but it's going to cost you more money to do that. But what are you going to use it for? Really, what we see texting as a tool for the overall program. So if you have a new newsletter coming out, you can text folks to let them know. If you're sending a note home from the school, again, you can text folks and, important letter coming home to you today from your child's school, please take a look at it. Other than that, if for emergency situations, lockdowns and that type of thing, you're going to use texting. But to genuinely communicate, to do mass communication, texting really isn't going to get you there, because nobody's going to read a long text message. It's just not going to, it just doesn't work that way. And if you send out too many, the one thing texting, really the limit is that people can opt out of it without you knowing about it. And so they can sit there and we all know we can block people, we do it to spam people who spam us on our phones, who want to buy our houses and all that other kind of stuff. And we block them, we block that information. And those people never know that we block them. That doesn't get back to them. And so that's the danger in relying too much on texting. But should you use it as a tool to inform, to let people know that things are going on? Absolutely. You should. That's part of what you should be doing. And in fact, I know that's part of what Sam's already doing. So what do we do? Well, we're gonna use the results of this to finalize and to make some tweaks to the strategic plan that we put together earlier. To be honest with you, there's not going to be a lot of tweaking to do. The baseline communications assessment we did for you was pretty much dead on. There's just a couple of things, and they're listed here. First is communications to the greater community. Again, one of the things we talked about is how your community, whether it's staff, whether it's community members, whether it's families, they don't rely a whole lot on the news media. And that's good, because because that opens up an opportunity for the district, for Litchfield, to become its own media. You already do that in part through social media. You're doing that in part through your website. But the more you do it and the more you go through your storytelling, the more you get the great information out there about your kids and teachers, the better off you're going to be. It does rely on storytelling, and we highly recommend that you do. You're doing a lot now. You do even more, because what storytelling does is personalize things for people. It's one thing to sit there and say, well, we're getting a new science curriculum, or we're getting a new math curriculum. It's a whole different matter when you show how that new science or math curriculum affects a child, or affects and how teachers react to it as well. You want to put those stories out there. You want to personalize things as much as possible. We also think you should communicate to the greater community more frequently. You can do this in several ways. You can do a quarterly newsletter if that's something you want to do. You can develop mailers, and that contain like QR codes to stories on your website, that type of thing. But we need as a district to really make an effort to inform your greater community of what's going on. Again, especially because you're a growing community, and new people coming in don't know as much as the folks who've been living here for 10 or more years. You got those folks. They're I'm not going to say they're in your pocket, but they're supporters. We know that. The data shows that. But what you have to do is make sure that the people coming in have as much information about the Litchfield Elementary School District as they can to make informed decisions, whether that's to work here or to send their child to one of your schools. And so there are different ways to do that. And again, it depends on the budget and everything else. We know it all comes down to money sometimes in the end, unfortunately. But we believe that there has to be an effort, and that has to go hand in hand with the things you're already doing to communicate with your community at large and the engagement you have with them. The other thing is, you need to communicate more in regard to finance. And in Arizona, that's hard to do because, I worked in Arizona schools for over 35 years, and I'm still not sure I understand the finance system because, bully to you, Mr. Vaughn, for understanding it. But a lot of times people don't. And really what it gets down to is people want to know how much money's coming in, where it's coming from, and how you're spending it. And one of the things we recommend is that you don't tell a whole story about that. There's always going to be the person who wants to know, who's going to, go through your finances and go through your POs and all that other kind of stuff. They're everywhere. They may have a little bit of understanding, but basically people want to know what's coming in and how's it going out. And you can really take care of that with some nice graphics as well. But that needs to go out to the general community as well, because they know less about the school finances than the people working in the schools and families coming to your schools. They need to know that. Again, why? They're your voters. 3 out of 5 homes don't have kids in school. They need to know how their money is being spent. While we like to think that they're out there just being nice people, these are their schools too. Not just the schools that belong to the parents and the children. These are their schools. And so they want to be supportive of it. And I know you have a couple of retirement areas in here. And so that kind of outreach so that they know what's going in is really good. And I will guarantee you, it will also kill rumors, because you guys always hear, you guys never contact us unless you want something from us. You always hear that around bond and override time. But it also will just kill rumors. Everybody, well, you guys spend too much on administration. Well, we know that's not true. We know that that's very little of the pot that's spent in any given school district, and that the majority of funds do go back to the classroom, either through teacher salaries and benefits or through materials and that type of stuff. And the other things that don't even count as classroom spending, transportation, meals, libraries, they all benefit kids. And as long as people can see that and draw their own conclusion, it's going to be better. One of the things we also recommend is sharing some district information via your school newsletters. Ask your principals to save a spot for however frequently they send them out. I know some send them out, some weekly, some every couple weeks, some monthly, but get a spot in there at least once a month from the district level, so you can submit some stuff there so that they feel a little bit more informed. Doesn't have to be anything long, doesn't have to be anything fancy, may even be a feature story. But get some space in there so that people know what's going on at the district level. And then we want you to continue to update the website, and that's something I know that Sam's going to continue to do. But one of the other things we really recommend, and this is part of the strategic plan already, is that a content calendar be developed by your communications office, so that we can deliver information to folks. If you don't have any parent newsletter, you're going to want to start one. If you don't, again, that's just inside baseball, but they need to know too. And so the better off, you're going to be better off. We saw in the slide, especially among the employees and how they get their information, that they rely on each other a lot. Well, from there, we recommend that you implement a consistent and regular internal newsletter. And we suggest using the KDS format. And KDS stands for know, do, share. And it's bullet points. Here's things you need to know. Here's things you need to do. Here are things you need to share. And you can wipe it out. Some folks do it weekly. Some folks do it every other week. Again, that depends on your needs as a district. One thing that internal communications allows you to do is be a little more flexible. You don't have to have it on the 15th of every month. For instance, if you just need to send it out when you need to, you're gonna be okay. And then finally, again, we mentioned the community, the external community, and communicating with them. There are several different ways you can do that, whether it be a newsletter, whether it be mailers with QR codes that refer back to the district's website. And setting up even like community festivals and stuff like that. We know you guys are out there already, but have information ready for them there. So I hope I didn't take up too much of your time, but I'm here to stand for any questions should you have them.
Yes, Ms. Clemmer, did you have any questions?
No, this is great information. Thank you very much. It's very helpful to us. I think inherently, just especially those of us that hear from constituents and hear from a lot of different people, a lot of these things make sense. We hear this fairly consistently. One thing I will point out is the communications in regards to finance. I know we've been talking about this a lot. It's in our strategic plan. It's something that we've been working on. So it's nice to hear that there's not nice to hear that there's still a need there, but at least we're on the right track and sort of identifying those things that our community wants to know about. So I look forward to seeing implement the strategic plan. So thank you.
Mr. Honak.
Thank you for the survey. I'm not feeling too great, so I'm not too eloquent tonight. But the weakness of the communication always seemed to be about engaging and seeking input. And my question is, the elephant in the room is that, you know, we're great about all these other communication things, but we're avoiding the real issue that we're just academically dismal in this district. We're not doing our job. We've only 30% of our 8th graders know math when they leave. I mean, that's just incredible ramifications of going to high school not knowing math because it's just part of logical thinking. And what I've seen as a board member, that a lot of members of the community have just tuned this place out. They've left, they've given up. And so my question is, how do we I have my opinion. I won't express it here right now while you're here, waste your time. Soapbox for that. My question is, how do we, if let's say we got enlightened all of a sudden and the board and everybody instead of focusing on critical race theory and gender identity and all this other stuff, decided that we really wanted to do our job, how would we communicate to the community to the degree that we could engage them? Because the strongest lever of academic achievement is not the school, it's getting parents engaged, not to be tutors at home, but to think it's important and convince their kids that it's serious. They have this one chance in their life. And you know, that I think this is, your survey showing a symptom of it, because it's saying about good job of engaging and seeking input. It's not drastically lower, but it's significant, it's consistently lower, which I interpret as a lack of parental engagement. I think that's the biggest thing, that this district could be the best in the state easily if we. So what do you think we could do in that direction?
Well, my interpretation of those results are a little different than yours, sir. I think the results suggest a high level of parent engagement in your schools already. Given the fact that you had almost 1,300 parents jump in on the survey from the start, from the jump, suggests that they are very much engaged with schools. Now, you know,
I don't disagree with that. I'm not sure you heard my question, or at least I didn't express it well. The engagement's very high, but the engagement is on things that are really irrelevant to what the big issue is. And the big issue, the purpose of the school isn't that parents and teachers get along and you know, that everybody knows when there's an event and all that sort of stuff. The real purpose, or at least there used to be the purpose of schools and what people looked at was, yeah, you need some other things, but basically the whole purpose of the schools is that you have an educated populace. And right now the schools are 100% not doing that. That's irrefutable. And the school, rather than communicate it, it hides it. And and so in a way, this survey, I don't want to blame you, not your fault, but this survey is really not focusing on the purpose of the school. So yeah, there's high level of engagement, but it's not the level of engagement that is going to increase academic achievement. And I don't think there's no question about it that the academic achievement is, this is not a happy place here. It's not a good place. It's not, it's shocking.
Mr. Honak, sorry, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying you're making invalid points at all. I am saying that I don't think this survey was addressing the academic stuff, so that's why it's not covering that stuff. It's just, this was merely meant to talk about how do parents and community members want to hear from the district so that we can then change our practices with communication. I understand what you're saying about the academic part. It's just that that's not what this survey was meant to be.
My answer to your question is, you follow the recommendations, you take a look at the survey, it tells you how to go about doing that engagement. That's what this survey does.
Okay, thank you. Fair answer.
Mr. Owens.
Thank you.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I have a couple of points. My first point is I would like to see the strategic communications plan and us have a deeper conversation about our communications as a board in a future study session. So if we could please add that to a future study session, I think there is a lot to be addressed from this feedback that we've received. To me, this feedback and the next steps are not really answering the questions that the board had or has regarding our communications. I feel like the email is the most preferred and relied upon method of communication because it is and has been the most used and reliable option. We didn't give people the option to select, for example, texting as their preferred method of communication. So I'm not sure how we can expect our families, staff, and community to know what they don't know are options. We didn't say, here's this amazing package, which now as board members, we have seen what this new communication package is that we are supposed to be implementing, although we don't have any dates on that yet, that we haven't provided that. To look at what those options are is really eye-opening to see where we have been and where we can potentially get to. In addition, we did hear from over 1,000 families, which is fantastic, but that's less than 20% of our families. So my question with that becomes, how do we reach out to the rest of our families? That 20% approximately of our families that completed this survey are likely people like me. I completed the survey. I'm very engaged with my child's education, but when it comes to communication, those people like me, we're going to look at the website. We're going to find the information that we need because we know all the different ways to get to that. Because I've had kids in this district for 15 plus years. But how do we reach those new families? How do we reach those folks that aren't as well versed in all of the options that have been around, over a decade in this district? Those are the types of questions that I want to get to, and I want to get answers to that are practical and applicable, that come out of the information that I'm seeing came out of this survey. Obviously, we need to step up our proactive communication. I think texting is a great way to do that. An actual example of that in action is our high school district texts and emails links to the newsletter. So they're not putting the entire newsletter in a text, but they're making sure that families have multiple opportunities to get that piece of information, and it's consistent. Some of the ways that they communicate that have changed over the last couple of years. And I, as a parent of a student in our high school district, have really appreciated some of those changes that they've made that have made a big difference in my information level at the high school. The other thing is, obviously, we need to seek more input from our families, staff, and community. So I'd like to see that in these next steps as well. So I think that's where, as a board, we can talk about, again, how to reach more of our families that we're trying to reach, how to be proactive in our communication, again, because families don't know what they don't know, and to seek input from all of our families, staff, and community to be really filling in the gaps that I see are coming out of this survey. But I'd love to hear what Mr. Cummings has to say about those particular recommendations or requests.
That's a lot. So I would suggest that the goal of every communications department is to continue to reach out to as many people as you want. In regards to the numbers coming in, 20% is a fairly significant number. And statistically speaking, it's very solid. We do nationwide surveying frequently whereby we're making, we're finding out decisions after only 800 people across the country have been interviewed. But we're pretty confident in the results and that these are reflective of the community in general. Again, we did address texting a bit as a tool. And again, one of the things we had mentioned is that you use a text to make people aware that there's a new newsletter coming out or that there's a letter coming home, that type of thing. Absolutely, it's a tool and should continue to be used. Getting more input from your community, that's a matter of engagement. And I think that's a much bigger discussion than how you get the information out to them. Those discussions certainly can be had. There are a number of steps you can take. You can have crucial conversations. You can have tabletop meetings and conversational meetings with people. There are, literally hundreds of ways to engage your community. To bring them in, to bring folks in, more folks in, is just a constant battle. It's a constant battle of not just the communications office, but every department in the school district and every school, because you want to engage as many people as you possibly can. And so it's a matter of consistency. It's a matter of doing the right things, of going out and communicating on a consistent basis. It's a matter of telling your story and using storytelling to show where the district is and how it influences life in your community. In addition to that, how you get there, again, that's the concept. That's why you have a communications office. And I can tell you right now that you have two of the best communicators in the state working for you right now. Now, how much, you can do and how much you can engage. And I hate to bring up the budget word, but I'm gonna, is how much do you want to spend on it? Because how much you put into this is really kind of a reflection. Remember, a budget is a reflection of your priorities as a school board. And so if you want greater communication, you want greater engagement, you're going to have to spend a little bit to get there. We're not suggesting that you spend a mountain full of money or anything like that, but it does come at a cost, and it comes with a cost. And so that's a decision that, of course, you make at the board table, how much you want to dedicate to that. But I can guarantee you, just from my own experience and from working for, again, over 30 years in this area, you have two people who are more than capable of bringing things around for you.
Thank you. The only thing I would say is that looking at the data as like how many results we got from each campus, we have Verrado Middle School that had 220 families that responded. Our answers that we're going to get from Verrado Middle School are going to be very different, I think, than the answers we're going to get from a Barbara Roby or a Corte Sierra that are our higher Title I schools. And they had much lower participation. So I think that Ms. Moran is right in that we have to figure out how to reach our Title I school families more, because I feel like those are the ones that are missing the mark. And to what Mr. Honak said, parent engagement is the number one indicator for student success. So we've got to figure out how to get this information to them so that they can be involved and can be engaged in their schools. And that's what this tells me, is that some of those schools, they're not engaging their families as much somehow because they're not participating. Because like you said, this shows us how high our participation is, but at some schools, not as much.
Yep. Well, having spent the majority of my career working for Title I school districts, I can tell you that they are very different than schools that have more money, that aren't serving in students who are under from poorer backgrounds. And the way you involve yourself there is you get out there. You have to be seen. You have to be out there, and you have to, if there's something involving their child, they're going to show up. They're going to show up to school, and that's your opportunity. There's no better communication, frankly, than one-on-one. We all know that. We're going to have a lot deeper conversation with a friend than we will, with the guy taking the survey. Okay, but for Title I schools in particular, you got to show up. You got to show up, not just as a school, but as a board. I would bet dollars to donuts, just because it's been my experience that when there's events at those Title I schools, all of your teachers are out there, and they're out there because that's their opportunity to talk with the parents. Any kind of event, whether it's a sporting event, a daddy-daughter dance, whatever they do, you're out there. And you also have to take a look at addressing folks on their time, because the Title I schools, they're not always going to be there for a 6 o'clock meeting because they might be working the second shift. You may have to do 3 or 4 different meetings over the course of the day So you meet parents in the morning who have just gotten off their shift, you meet parents in the afternoon who are just going on their way to work, or you meet parents in the evening who spent the full day working. That's what you do. You show up, and you got to do it. And those, I mean, you can tell your stories from those schools as well, and you need to. It's absolutely critical that they not be overlooked, and I can't imagine that that's even happening in any district. But you got to show up. That's how you engage them. You show up. They're going to show up for different things, but you know, some parents will show up for a soccer game. Other parents will show up for the school art fair. Other parents will show up for the school spelling bee. But when they're there, make sure you have somebody there to meet with them and to talk with them and to chat with them. And that's how you engage them.
Thank you. So all the schools should be listening. We need to engage our families in person. Also, that's another great way. So that was all the questions I had. Did anybody else have anything else that came up? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was very helpful for us. Our next presentation is going to be the K-8 math curriculum 1-year update for the board about iReady. This is going to be done by Claudia Salinas. There was a change in the presentation, so please make sure if you haven't looked at it to pull it up on your board docs, board members.
Are we good to go? Well, thank you, Madam President. Also to the members of the board and also Superintendent Davison, and also to the Litchfield community for giving us, our company, Curriculum Associates, the opportunity tonight to kind of showcase the first year implementation of the iReady Classroom Core Mathematics program. My name is Steve Chandler, and I'm the local area representative supporting Litchfield School District. I come to you tonight with just a small fraction of our team. I'm going to let them introduce themselves also.
Hi, board members. My name is Rachel Hollenbeck, and I am the PD specialist that has been working with Litchfield. And I love this district. The teachers are amazing. The admins are amazing. Your district coaches are incredible. So thank you for partnering with us. It's been a great joy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Salinas, and I will be going over your data today. So again, thank you so much for having us. So I did put a little bit of agenda together. So we'll start with goals, look at growth and performance, some connections to online instruction, and some reflections that we have for you. So one of the things that we did at the very beginning of this implementation is meet with your curriculum and instruction team and come up with what are the goals for this implementation. The first one was making sure that we have a high quality instruction curriculum for mathematics in tier 1 instruction. And then more importantly, using data to inform instruction that provides resources for tier 2 and tier 3, but always for the purpose of accelerating all students. So that it is also very critical. And the goal, of course, is to increase student performance in mathematics in all grade levels. So what I would share is that as we started with the implementation, it starts with what we just talked about, professional development. And these are some of the comments that your teachers shared during our survey of PD. If you're looking at your handouts, they are out of order because I always work on making sure that the communication is as clear as possible. And I printed these before I refined them, but you will have the deck as well. But one of the things that your teacher said to us was that they personally enjoy the format of the iReady and think it is useful and effective curriculum, and they have a great addition to our schools and teachers. So having at the very beginning that professional development, that teachers are excited about teaching mathematics, that just transcends into the classroom. So that's very exciting. So before I start going into the data, I did want you to know that when we look at our data, it is color coded. So when you see green, dark green, that means that a student is mid or above grade level. A student who is mid or above grade level, they're going to be very successful. Then light green, early grade level, yellow, 1 grade level below, red, 2 grade levels, and super dark red is more than 3 grade levels below. So we want to make sure that teachers have data, but that data always correlates to on-grade level instruction. And it is important that as teachers, we see both normative data and criterion data. So we're super excited about what we've seen in regards to your growth. I'm going to talk about 2 data points here. The first data point that you see on your left-hand side of the screen is the data and the growth between the beginning of the school year and middle of the year. So you can see that your teachers working together, teaching tier 1 instruction with Ready Classroom, were able to move from 35% below grade level to 22%, but simultaneously increase those students that were on grade level from 18% to 34%. So that is very, very exciting. So that was during the middle of the school year. You are actively finishing your end of year assessment right now. So this is preliminary data on the right-hand side here. And this is only looking at a subset of students, which is about 846 students of all of your district, with more testing finishing their assessments right now. But if you look at that data, you're seeing that the students below grade level were reduced from 26% to 12%. So that's extremely exciting. And then we were able to work together and increase students who were on grade level from 23 to 62%. So I honestly cannot wait to see the final outcome of everybody after they finish all their end of the year diagnostic, but this is just incredible growth that we've seen in mathematics. The other thing that we also do to support the district is this is part of the mid-year data review. So here you see your grade levels. The dotted line is what we call your median % of typical growth. That means that across the country, that is where typically the middle student, the child in the middle, is performing. And you will see that all of your grade levels, with the exception of a few, are above that line. So again, this is the middle of the year data. We still had more to go. So here's your preliminary data for right now of those students who have tested, and everyone is above that threshold. I did want to make a note before you look at kinder and say, oh goodness, what happened there? Only 100 students had tested. So again, very small sample size. This data, I had to pull it on Friday. Today, when I looked at it before joining you this afternoon, we actually have that line has moved up. So you have 48% have met or exceeded their typical growth. So that means they're on the blue line, on that teal line. So again, once we have the whole data set, kindergarten will be above that line as well. I'm pretty confident of that. So please do not let kinder scare you. That's only 100 students when I pull that data. But the most important thing when you look at this quadrant grid is that your students are not just growing, they're also performing. So that's what we want. We want both students to grow and perform and get to grade level.
Okay, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
so on the previous slide, we just got this presentation or a previous version of this presentation yesterday. I'm 100% a data person, charts, numbers, all of it. I don't understand this chart. Can you please explain this chart to me like I'm an 8th grader?
Absolutely. And I want to make sure that this chart you're referring to is the one I have on my screen.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So this is taking into consideration all the students who tested, and the amount of students who tested were 9,117 students across the district. So if you look at the axis, on your y-axis, you have your growth, and on your x-axis, you have your performance. So when we look at this graph, based on the data, all your grade levels are pointed there. The most important line that you want to look at is, well, not important line, but one of the lines that is important to see is that dotted line in the middle. That is your typical growth. So typical growth means this is what a student typically would grow by the end of the school year. Okay. By the end of the school, students coming to school typically would get here. We have 12 million students using iReady. So this is empirically derived data. And when we talk about medium growth, that means it's the child in the middle. It's not averages, because when you provide averages, you have extremes in that average. And when you add extremes, you actually don't have the best information. So if we line up all the students, this actually represents a real student in the middle of learning of where they are. So then what we put is all your grade levels in this coordinate grid, whether they're performing or growing. So ideally, we want everyone in quadrant 1, where everybody is high performance, high growth. But we're not there yet. So what we want is growth toward that quadrant. So here you will see that between the beginning of the year and the middle of the year, your seventh grade students had the most growth and the most performance. Sixth grade, for example, had the same amount of same amount of performance, but not as much growth. So that is what this grid means. So I'm going to pause for just a second, make sure I was able to explain that as clearly as possible.
Yes, I understand what this is saying. Do you know if, and I know you had a brief explanation on the kinder number. Do you know if that kinder number was impeded by the fact that kinder didn't have devices across the district, or explain the kinder anomaly again, please?
Unfortunately, that is not a question I can answer in regards to the devices. That would be something that your district would have to explain. What I will tell you is that kindergarten students, some went to pre-K and that was great. Some during the pandemic did not go to pre-K, so they may have started a little bit earlier than traditionally. We will be able to provide better data in regards to trends and patterns after we renorm, and we are in the current renorming stages right now. And that will take into effect basically where the entire country is after the pandemic. And it will give a little bit more explanation of some of the grade levels that are not showing as much growth and performance than others. But if I go to right now, this is again, as of Friday, your kindergarten students, even though it looks like they're in the same space, that was only 100 students. So it's not enough data for me to compare fall to winter. But based on the data today, that I pulled this morning, you have 48% of your students have met or exceeded their typical growth that we expect by the end of the year.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that as well. So we're comparing fall to spring. In a previous slide, you said the spring number was 846 students out of our 9,000 students. Do you know, are those specific grades, specific schools? What's the population on that 846 students?
So in order for this assessment to be psychometrically valid, there has to be 12 weeks between each assessment, minimum 12, ideally 18. So your window for the end of the year assessment just opened up last week. So as your schools are in that stage of assessing, you are seeing preliminary numbers. This number has doubled already as of this morning, but we're not done with the testing window. So I cannot compare accurately. So that's why I keep saying preliminary data, because not all 9,000 students have tested.
Yes, I understand that. So I guess my follow-up question to that is, why are we looking at this data if we don't know the validity of it? I mean, it seems like we're not really comparing apples to apples, and this 846 students could be from our TA. They could be from, I mean, I'm having a hard time trying to utilize this presentation, which is going to take up a large portion of this meeting tonight, to really make an assessment of iReady based on this information.
Can Ms. Moran, as a parent who was volunteering at a school this morning, I know that they have been pulling kids every day. So I would imagine that these results are actually coming in from across our campuses as they're testing kids. I don't think it's from just a couple of schools. Because like I said, I was at a campus today and they've been pulling kids every day for their testing. And as they test them, it goes in there. So maybe the district can answer that better as far as the testing goes, but that's my understanding of these numbers.
I don't disagree with that. I know everyone's working as hard as they can to test, and I understand the testing is happening right now. I guess I'm just asking as a board member, and this is supposed to be an opportunity for us to assess the impact of iReady, and it just feels like we're not really ready to do that. So I'm happy to hear from, and I understand that our district has asked iReady, so this really isn't a question for the folks from iReady who are here presenting. So I apologize. This is nothing against this information that you're presenting. I want to hear more about this information. I just feel like I'd like to hear from someone on the admin team, whether we're really ready to make an assessment on the impact of iReady.
Dr. Juicy.
Yes, I agree with you. The spring results after the diagnostic is complete is going to give a clear picture of the impact of iReady curriculum. I do think there are some other helpful things in this presentation. in regards to how the implementation has been delivered. Maybe not the final results that Ms. Moran is speaking to, but also looking at the implementation up until this point, and we can always circle back once we have the final results and show apples to apples where the kids started at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. So I still think there's parts of this presentation that would be helpful, that wouldn't take up time when we circle back to the actual final results, because we can speak to the implementation.
Okay, great. I guess I would like to know at the end, maybe when we will have a complete analysis would be helpful. Thank you. Continue, please.
Your window for assessment ends next week, so you will have apples to apples comparison by then. And we can definitely work with your school leaders to give you all that data, which you actually have access to right now. So thank you for all those questions, by the way. So here's where we are, but I did want to spend a moment and talk a little bit more about our stretch growth, and I'll try to expedite this part as well. So one of the things that I just wanted to share with you is how our growth model works. Every single student gets 2 data points. One is called the typical growth and one is called the stretch growth. So I already kind of explained a typical growth is what we typically expect for a student to get at the end of the year. Now, if you look at this student, this is a fictitious student. Her name is Danielle. She is a 5th grader who scored grade 4. Again, because we have 12 million students using iReady and we look at patterns and trends through our psychometricians, we know that a student like Danielle typically by the end of the year would get to 576. The other thing we do is always put grade level. So green is grade level. So if you see this, at the end of the year, this student's still not at grade level. So then we went back and said, okay, who caught up and how did they catch up? And then what data point did they get to? What part of the scale score? So every student also gets a stretch growth, a little bit more ambitious, but attainable. But that stretch growth helps us give a vision of where do we need to be to really accelerate learning. And whether you're a struggling learner or you're an advanced learner, you're still going to get a typical and stretch growth. So again, I always say this comment, it's like the quote from John F. Kennedy, a high tide raises all ships. What we want to do is provide the data that is raising all student achievement no matter where they are. So knowing that typical and stretch growth, I did want to share, and again, this is preliminary data. We'll work with your school leaders and happy to come back and give you the apples to apples comparison. But here is the students who have achieved typical and stretch growth across the district between the beginning and the end of the year. We normally see that most districts get 50% of typical growth. So if you look at your 3rd graders, you already have 25% more students who have exceeded that 50% that we normally see. So that's great growth. And then going back to kinder, you have 23% of your students who have achieved that stretch growth already. And normally we only see about 20% of students getting to stretch growth across all grade levels. So looking at 6th grade, 47% of your students have already hit stretch. That means that's 27% more than what we typically see. So again, preliminary data, happy to come back. But the last thing I wanted to show you is how the personalized instruction works with the teachers teaching. So teachers focusing on high quality instructional material, using data to work on tier 2 and tier 3, saving time so they can focus on instruction. The path, the digital path, works in tandem with the teacher. Our recommendation is that students are on the system 30 to 49 minutes a week. And when you see those metrics, you see more students surpassing that typical growth. So, so that is also very exciting. And overall, I support the entire country. I love working with school districts. It was an honor to present in front of you. I normally don't see this type of growth. And again, I work with the largest systems across the country. And I was just blown away. And I too want to see that apples to apples comparison. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any other questions or if the district has anything else to add.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
I don't. I think that, I mean, the framework that we're seeing is positive, and I think that's important, right? I mean, I know we have a long way to go, and this is the first year. So until we are, completely able to utilize this with consistency and fidelity across the district, always, we'll probably see even more growth. But I think this is at least we're moving in the right direction and, seeing that. In terms of the comparisons, when we have all the data, right, and all of it is here, and we have sort of this fall, winter, and then spring data, is this type of thing from a school level, not just your own classroom, but school level, is this available? And this might not be your question, maybe this is Dr. Doozy or someone else, to our district leaders. Obviously, the administrators have access to all of it, but at a school level, can they see not only their classroom, but their school and how they're comparing to others? Because I think that's also important. If there's someone that's doing it really well, there might be some best practices shared. When you see someone else's growth through the roof, you always want to, make sure you're doing the right thing. So is sharing data part of this process is a basic question.
Absolutely. The teachers can see their own data. The school sites has been designated as having building access. As far as comparability, that's something we also provide to the building principals. And we also we're going to provide in principal their opportunity to look at their data. And we're having a data dive and a decision rich, right? Opportunity for principals to look at all their data, including our benchmark data, our ASBA data, as well as the iReady diagnostic, and definitely those comparisons and learning from each other, right? Our principal teams are our ultimate professional learning community, and learning from each other and how they can implement best practices that have shown success at the other sites, and learn from each other. So absolutely, that is definitely our guiding coalition, our district guiding coalition's focus for next year, using this data to make decisions.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think also just having another piece of data like this too, we just talked about communicating with parents and that engagement level. I know as we a couple of times a year sit down with parents one-on-one, teachers sit down with parents and have that, this would be really instrumental, I think, in helping parents understand, what is my kid doing? I see them working online. I see them doing things. What are they really doing? This helps us digest that and really understand, okay, I'm actually seeing some growth. They're not just, playing math games online or whatever it might be. There's some method to that madness. I think this is pretty impressive. So thank you.
So, and one of the other things that at our mid check with iReady that we looked at was the use of MyPath. And what this graph is showing you is that and correct me if I'm not using the right verbiage, but the students that are using MyPath with more consistency and frequency are the same students that are showing the highest level of performance and growth. So it is absolutely directly correlated to the time that they're spending, and also not just the time they're spending on MyPath, but their accuracy with their responses on iReady. Those two factors are definitely correlated to students that are achieving more. So that is very positive to see. And we saw that not just how you're seeing it more global. We saw it by site, by grade. There was a clear correlation. So.
And Ms. Clymer, just to add, the pie graph is at 70%. So what we know from our research is that if students aren't meeting those minutes, but 70% passing is where you're seeing that growth. I'm going to go back to your previous question in regards to conversation. So there are tools that in this partnership is truly a partnership. It's like, here's what, like lots of conversations, but one of the professors that works with us is Dr. John Hattie, and he talks a lot about data, about goal setting. All those goal settings are built into iReady, and iReady Central. There's guidance for principals to talk about goal setting with teachers with students, and the family reports are available in student family language. And there is also data chats on how to have those parent conversations. So those tools are also available. And in this partnership, we're always trying to make them better and refine them so we can work together.
Yeah, I love that parent-friendly language. We talk a lot of times up here about all the acronyms and all of the verbiage that we use that's just to us is second nature, but to parents is a little bit confusing. So I appreciate that, both as a parent, as someone who has had that question asked a lot. What does this really mean? How does this make sense? So thank you. I look forward to the final results. Thank you.
Mr. Honak.
No questions. I studied it pretty well, looking for more data.
Absolutely.
Mr. Owens.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the final results, and then also just getting in the hands of our teachers so that I can see the progression of the students and, who's performing and who needs an extra attention. So thank you.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, I agree. I am really excited by the preliminary results. I can't wait to see the next step. I won't say final result, but at least kind of the final of year one. Obviously, if year one, if we look at this as maybe a 5-year kind of process, year one would be our hopefully least successful year. So if we're already trending above where we expected or above where iReady would expect or above the kind of national averages for growth, then I think that's really exciting. And I can't wait for us to learn more, tweak more, and just see even more learning happening from our students. So I love iReady, everything I've seen that my student has done, and the tools that you have that just make it easy for students to be at their level and actually learn really customized information is amazing. And I think it's only going to get better and better from here. So thank you.
I don't have any questions either, but I do want to say as a parent, I do like the parent reports that they have. I've gotten them from both of my students that use iReady when they do the diagnostic testing, and it's very easy to understand. So that is super important to me as a parent. And I am excited. I know we don't see final like end of year numbers here for everybody, but it shows like we're doing tremendous growth. And I think the exciting thing will actually be to see where we are next year after having this year and then having a second full year with it to see where our kids have really gotten to. I think that's where we're really going to have good data to see how great this has been for our students. But I've gotten nothing but positive feedback from every single teacher that has talked to me about this program. They all love it. So I'm very glad that we were able to do this year, and to see the growth we're seeing is fantastic. Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Okay, we are going to move on to the 2024 bond program introduction. This will be by Executive Director Michael Vaughn.
Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Superintendent Gunning, colleagues and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the proposed 2024 bond program. As a reminder, a bond is a funding source available to Arizona school districts with the approval of local taxpayers through an election. Typically, bonds are used to pay for large capital items that the district's typical capital funding sources are insufficient to cover. Our proposed bond program for 2024 includes a focus on safety and security renovations and equipment, repairs including roofing, air conditioning, and other renovations of school buildings, technology and classroom equipment, new school construction, and school buses and other student transportation vehicles. At the April 25th study session, we discussed in some detail most of these categories. Tonight, I'll touch on the remaining areas of the bond program. Litchfield Elementary School District has moved to a one-to-one student-to-device model. Based on industry research, we have noted that on average, student devices have 4 to 5 years before they become obsolete, and some student devices become broken with use. The district anticipates needing additional funding to help support the replenishment of the student devices. The district also provides other audiovisual equipment in classrooms such as projectors. Across the district, this equipment is aging and will need to be replaced over the life of the bond program. Similar to educational technology, school buses also only last for a period of time. Based on industry research, an average school bus can last for 12 to 15 years prior to it becoming more costly to maintain than to replace. The district currently has 18 school buses that are older than 15 years, and over the life of the bond program, some school buses will need to be replaced to keep the fleet operating well. Through these bond funds, the district would also have the opportunity to explore other student transportation options, such as white fleet vehicles that do not require a CDL to drive, to potentially help address the school bus driver shortage. To continue our discussion on the potential bond program, we will also hear from Paul Bentz from High Grounds, who conducted community polling on our potential bond program prior to the board having the opportunity to consider a vote to call for an election in November. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you might have regarding the bond program prior to us hearing from Mr. Bentz.
Ms. Clymer.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Honak.
Just a quick one, the ones that don't require a CDL, how big are those buses?
It varies based on the regulations. Megan, do you happen to know that off the top of your head?
There is some change recently coming out from the trust in regards to our 12 to 15 passenger vans, that there's different regulations now. So we'll look into that, but typically it's the 12 to 15 passenger van that you'd be talking about.
Thank you.
Mr. Owens,
No questions.
Ms. Moran. Ms. Moran, we cannot hear you. Hold on, just,
Oh, I'm sorry. I could not hear you there. Oh, now.
okay, yeah, we can hear you, sorry. You are cutting out. Hold on just a second. Are you,
I'm here. I do not have any questions. Everything was covered in the previous discussion that the board had at the last meeting.
awesome. I do not have any questions either. Thank you for that. I guess we are going to now move on to our presentation, our bond polling results from Paul Bentz.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Bentz. I am the Senior Vice President of Research and Strategy at High Ground Public Affairs. I'm also a parent here in the district. I've had 3 daughters that have gone through Palm Valley Elementary School. We're going to talk a little bit about voter data, but before we do that, since we've talked a lot about polling data today, and since you've had a couple of different surveys that you've looked at, I thought it would be really helpful to give you guys an understanding of what electorate looks like in an off-cycle election. So if you could indulge me with a little bit of audience participation, I'd really appreciate it. Could everyone who's here today stand up for just a minute? I know, boo, boo, boo. You're all in education, so you understand. So right now, you represent the adult population in the state of Arizona. It's about 5.8 million folks who live in Arizona who are over the age of 18 who might be eligible to vote. So everybody from here on back, go ahead and sit down. You too as well. This is the portion of the adult electorate that is actually registered to vote. More than 25% of the adult population in the state of Arizona is not registered to vote. So when we talk about voter turnout, 1 in 4 of the folks who live in this state are not going to show up in the election. So the highest voter turnout that we've experienced in recent years, 2020, which was 80.1%, was 80.1% of this. So the rest of these folks that sat down, and you too as well, you can sit down, please. This is what massive presidential election voter turnout looks like. A little bit over 60% of the adult population in the state of Arizona showed up to vote in that presidential election. So when we talk about the gubernatorial election, you can sit down. You folks can sit down as well. And if you were standing, I'd ask about half of you guys to sit down. This is what gubernatorial election looks like when we talk about the adult population. Just slightly, right around 50%, 48% of the adults in the state of Arizona showed up in our gubernatorial election. Now you're all sitting, so that's great. And really what it comes down to is basically this table right here, if they were still standing, is the number of adults who are going to show up when we talk about an off-cycle November 2023 election. When the president is not at the top of the ticket, when the governor's race is not on the ballot, we have a significantly lower voter turnout. We're talking about 30% or so of registered voters, which is 30% of the 70%. So just bear that in mind. We make sure that all of our polling focuses on this election. We know who shows up. The folks who are going to show up are going to show up no matter what. It comes down to who shows up around them. So all of this data is based on likely off-cycle off-cycle voters, the voters who are going to show up no matter what. I don't know. I'm very loud, but not that loud. It's a 400 sample survey. We did this district-wide from April 27th through May 1st. It is a margin of error of 4.9. Well, it means every one of our numbers could be about 5 points higher or 5 points lower. So when we look at a couple of things like the ballot test, what we're looking for is high 60%, high 50 to 60% range as we test an issue to see if it has viability, because it could be 5 points higher. If it was 55%, it could be 60 or it could be 50. So all of the numbers that we're looking at are in that 5-point margin of error. These are all live callers. We called voters that are likely to vote in the selection, and then we balanced it based on their participation, which means a couple of things. More than 60% of this electorate will be over the age of 50. More than 45% of this electorate would be Republican. And then we used regional balancing. So this is not a self-identified survey. We called both home phones and cell phones, and we direct out cell phones as required by law. But we call folks and that have a history of participating in this. So this is a little different than the consumer survey. But what is interesting is when I heard the consumer data earlier, he's 100% correct. Only about 35% of the likely voters in this district have kids at home. That means the vast majority of your electorate, just like your consumers, are not interacting with the district on a day-to-day basis. Even more so, 30% of your respondents, 30% of your likely voters are over the age of 65. What that means is that they are being educated about what's going on in our public schools, not by what you're saying and not by what may be necessarily happening here, but what they perceive through the national media, what they perceive through cable news may be happening in the district, whether or not is actually happening. So look at that through this lens as we talk to the likely voter and get an understanding of where they're coming from. One thing that we ask to start is, do you believe in general that public schools are headed in the right direction or wrong direction? It's about 30.5% right direction compared to 43% wrong direction. That's up from a year ago, nearly double, back up from 15 up to 30. I will say post-COVID, this district and others were at that 40% range. And this is pretty common throughout most of the state, is that we saw most school districts, despite the fact that only 30% have kids at school, in that 40% right direction. What we do see is that we did see a precipitous increase in this area. Also, the 40 to 49 and the 30 to 39 were much more inclined, those folks that have kids at home from an age bracket, as well as those who have actual kids at home that they self-described, were more likely to be optimistic. What is interesting, though, is when you compare that to the actual job performance of the district, we asked them on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 meaning poor or failing, to 5 meaning excellent, how would you rate the overall performance of Litchfield Elementary School District in offering education to our students in our community? What at a mean score of 3.5, we're going to talk a lot about mean scores today, because what a mean score does is it takes the opinion of everybody who has an opinion. It takes out that 26% that don't have an opinion and asks everybody else. Of the folks that have an opinion of the district, despite there being pessimism about the direction of education in the community, they have a generally well-regarded result for the district. It's a 3.52. It's been pretty consistent for a while. We have about 38% that give it an excellent, very good, compared to only about 9% that give it a poor and failing. The excellent, very good is higher to the 30 to 39. It's also much higher among those who have kids at home. So what we see here is there's certainly opportunities for improvement with the reputation of the district, but similar to how folks maybe hate Congress but love their congressman, people maybe have some negative opinions about education in the community, but generally have a positive view about education within the district. A 3.5 generally regards it as about a very good score, somewhere between okay and very good as we do this sort of ranking. When you ask, we start with a pretest, and the goal here is to replicate the ballot language, because if you ask an individual, do you support education? you'll see a higher level of yes. If you say, would you be willing to maybe pay taxes to support education? You'll still see a pretty high number of level of yes. But when you ask them to issue form of Class B general obligation bonds and the principal amount not to exceed 100 million, that is what they'll likely see on the ballot. And so what we do and why we are committed to accurate and unbiased polling is to give the best replication of what a likely voter would see on the ballot to see where they start. So knowing what you know right now, would you vote yes or no on this bond? We start with a 61.5. When we look at this threshold, it meets that 5% margin of error that we're looking at. So that means it could be down at the 55% range, or it could be as high as 65%. I am not telling you today that if you were to place a bond on the ballot, which is your decision to make, that it would pass with 61%. What I am here saying is that it has a significant amount of viability for a couple of different reasons. There's issues listed within this bond that are very popular among the voters, and that when given the chance, there is a likelihood that they would pass such an issue. A couple of things that I look at that are very powerful when I look at this data is it has across the board age support, including 65 and older. Bear in mind that 65 and older is 30% of the electorate. They are the largest driver of this audience. Where they go, this electorate goes. The other portion of this, it has 63% of those who do not have kids at home. So those two numbers show that it has a powerful amount of strength when we look at the pretest. I will tell you, I am testing bonds and overrides throughout the region and throughout the state, and there aren't as many that have this high level of support. That's just a bit of factual information. That negativity that I talked about earlier that has basically brought most school districts from about 40% right direction down to 30% right direction. What we see is in a lot of these bond issues, we see a similar softness where instead of seeing a 61%, we'll see a 53 or 52%. So this starts in a really strong position. But the pretest is to just give you an idea, without a public education effort, without efforts within to help the community understand what you might potentially pay for, this is where we start. From there, we go into, and we've done this before, if you recall, if you've been through a couple of these presentations with me, what we do from there is we test the projects. Each one of these projects is randomized and rotated. So some folks got construction of a new school first, other folks got technology and classroom equipment first. The whole goal behind this is to give everybody the opportunity to rate these on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meaning not at all important, to 5 meaning very important. It eliminates the bias, so there's no voter fatigue. Because what I hear a lot as well, if you ask technology first, it will be the highest every time, or construction will be lower. So by randomizing and rotating this, everybody gets a slightly different survey, and we can count on these results to show that there's a strong amount of voter support. Anything above a 3 is positively received. Anything above a 3.5 is strongly received. We like to see items above 4. In this case, safety and security renovations, that was the number 2 issue that we tested, did incredibly well. Technology and classroom equipment was number 3. The number 1 issue that we tested, however, was critical repairs. Voters are receptive to the notion that there are critical repairs to our schools that need to be done, especially when it comes to roofing and air conditioning. One thing I'll say is words matter. Look at the difference between school modernization and critical repairs such as roofing and air conditioning. For a lot of us, those would mean the same thing. Oh yeah, no, those are the, I mean, modernization, critical repairs. But what we find is actually the words, the descriptions, the more descriptive you can be on these topics, the better that you do. That is a 4.60, 75% of respondents found that very important. Compare that to modernization at a 3.7 with only 32% giving it a very important. So the way it is described, the way that it is presented to the electorate, and by the way, none of this is intended to influence the outcome of the election. This is all an educational piece for you to make a wise decision of whether or not that you want to move forward with the election. But words matter. The way you describe this can be very critically important, because when we put all of these mean scores together, what we find is that there are tiers to the level of support. That top tier is critical repairs, safety and security, and technology. Those are well above 4.26 and above. You can see sort of the middle tier there is renovation, modernization, and school buses. And then right at 3.5 is building a new school. While building a new school is critical for keeping up with growth, when you look at the broader electorate who may not necessarily benefit from a new school, there's pockets that we can look at that are very much interested and excited about a new school, but do not make this bond just about a new school. This bond is about so much more if you were to move forward with it when it comes to critical repairs, safety and security, and technology. So what we did from there is we test favor statements and opposition statements. Half the folks get favor statements first and half the folks get opposition statements first. To be clear, everyone receives every single question in this survey. All 400 respondents receive every question. The only thing that is in doubt is the order in which they receive them. So the whole reason behind that is to not move any electorate one way or the other. We're trying to ascertain why people may be willing to support and why people are maybe willing to oppose. If we asked 400 people, why do you like this or why do you not like this? We would get 400 different answers. And sorting through that is not a job I would like to put on you or on me or any of us to get an understanding. So what we do then instead is we take general themes that we have perceived through talking with district staff and others, through the national conversation, through the local conversation, to get an understanding what might be standing in people's way or what might be the reasons for people to vote yes. And so we measure those, and these are the statements that we tested. And what we see is safety and security was the #1 issue that we tested. Litchfield Elementary School District makes safety of its students and staff a #1 priority. We need to continue to invest in upgrades to school safety and security features to ensure the safest learning environments possible. 61% of voters strongly agree with that. It's a 4.33. That's a very powerful statement. School safety and security is a driving force within the electorate of why they would be willing to favor something such as this. Keeping up with growth. Growth is higher. I will point this out. Growth is down slightly from a year ago. When we tested growth a year ago, growth was a little bit more of a powerful statement. What growth has translated to, as I've done other polling throughout the region, is growth is translated to congestion. Voters are concerned about congestion and the wideness of our streets and what growth is doing. That doesn't mean it's not powerful, it still is, but school security is #1. Growth is a slightly lower, measured at 4.00, 47% agree. Safe and healthy learning environment, on the other hand, was a 4.17 with almost 50% strongly agree. With aging buildings in the district, we need to support building modernization, repair, and upgrades to ensure that all students have a safe and healthy learning environment. That is a very powerful statement that most voters agree with. Now, on the other hand, we always test the negative arguments. The goal here is, I always say, you don't go to the doctor to find out what's right with you. You go to the doctor to find out what's wrong with you. And so we always have tested the most essential negative statements to see if there's vulnerabilities or things that the district needs to be paying attention to. And one that is being prevalent, I will point out, is inflation. Now, inflation of the 3 arguments that we tested is the most volatile, because I've done 2 statewide surveys in the last month. While gas prices were higher, affordability was the #2 issue facing the state. When gas prices fell a little bit, affordability was the #4 issue facing the state. So inflation is one that, when we tested it at this time, was only 2.9 with 24% slightly agree. It is higher, I will point out. 65 and older is concerned about inflation. Talking to those audiences, communicating to them what these essential needs are, will be important if you decide to move forward, because there are concerns about inflation. On the other hand, compared to a year ago, critical subject matter has subsided significantly. That doesn't mean there aren't certain audiences that are still concerned about controversial subject matter, but the high water mark of controversial subject matter is down pretty significantly. Is not an overarching concern among the electorate as it has been in the past. There are portions that it still sticks out from, particularly those with kids at home. But I will point out that when you look at this, especially compared to other districts that are still having a very active conversation about this, the critical subject matter controversy, as it were, and the cable news that feeds into that topic is down pretty significantly. Asking for more money, election fatigue. This is one that we hear a lot. They just ask for money year over year. This one is a 2.85 with 24% strongly agree. It is vulnerable among the 65 and older. They do, when you look at them compared to safety and security, if you talk to a voter and talk about, well, you come at year after year, the response is not, well, actually, we don't come that often and our taxes are very low. You don't litigate taxes with them. Talk about what would be funded with this. And you talk about it in a way that this is safety and security, this is critical renovations, and they are much more inclined to understand that need than litigating a tax discussion with those. When we put them all on the scale together, and this is why we do this, all of the reasons to support far outweigh the reasons to oppose. And in fact, there's not a single opposition statement that we tested scored above 3, which means it's a convincing argument. Now, that I'm not saying that that doesn't mean people are going to say that. They will, of course, say those things. They will say taxes are too high. They will say that inflation's out of control, and they will say that our schools are teaching controversial subject matter. What I am saying is that talking about this from a board's perspective, from a staff perspective, from a public communications perspective, from educating the community is not about hitting on those negative items, but rather very succinctly and very pointedly pointing out the things that this is for, not necessarily what this issue is addressing or what it is against. And when we go back to a post test, we always ask this because people move over the courses of the survey, and people say, really, they actually do? Of course. In fact, what we typically see over the course of the survey is we typically see a degradation, because this is an equal influence, right? Most campaigns aren't necessarily an equal influence. One side or the other will generally have more communication than the other, but to give it equal influence, to eliminate any bias, where did this item end? We ask them again, we end at 60.7. So a slight decrease, about a point, but really a solid post-test. We like to see a pre-test at that 60% range. We like to see a post-test in that 55% range. We still maintain 56% of that 65 and older, and we still maintain 64% of those with no kids at home. So when we look at the delta here, we do see a slight decline among younger voters, among the 40 to 49. But overall, what we see is it's a pretty solid group that we look at as we go through this. So the final question that we asked is, we made a statement that basically said the Agua Fria School District is also considering a bond next year. Which of the following statements comes closest to your own? I will vote yes on both. I will vote no on both. I will vote yes only for Litchfield. I will vote yes for only Agua Fria. The idea here is to see if both issues are on the ballot, what would likely happen. Most of the time we see less than 50% say yes on both. In this case, we actually do see 54% saying yes on both. There are 28% though, almost 30% of your electorate that is no matter what. So when you cobble together a 50%, if you're trying to build a coalition of 50% yes, you're really talking about building 50 percentage points out of the remaining 70%, because there's pretty much a third of your electorate that's no matter what. So when we look at that though, 54 plus 7, which is Litchfield's number, it's right back up at that 61%. Compare that to within our district now, Agua Fria is bigger. It does include another elementary school district. That would likely be a little bit lower at 58%. This tracks with what we've seen historically from electoral participation, that Litchfield has performed better than Agua Fria when we come to for the post ballot and when we look at actual election results. As I mentioned, about 36% of respondents have kids at home. And this trend of, you can see that really it's about 10 points higher. If you were to evenly describe an electorate, you would generally assume them to be about a third consider themselves conservative, about a third consider themselves moderate, and a third considers themselves progressive. In our electorate, which shouldn't be a surprise from talking to the constituents, it shifts about 10 points towards the conservative model. So with that, I know you've received a lot of numbers today. I hope I hope I've been very clear, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Ms. Clymer.
Hi, Paul. It's nice to see you again.
Hi.
I have heard a version of this presentation many times, either between us and Agua Fria over the years, over the bonds and the overrides. And you still always manage to teach me something I didn't know before. So thank you. Great information. No questions.
Mr. Honak.
I thought your presentation was really hard hitting, wham, bam, incredible amount of information, and it's very well done. And it seems very credible and useful because it really hit specifics and nerves and things like that. So, yeah, you did a great job.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Mr. Owens.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Moran.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Betts.
Thank you.
I also have no questions. This information is always useful, even though we've seen it several times. It changes over time, but
It's different every
it's
time.
different every time, but yes.
I swear to you, we do the
No, it
survey
is
every
different
time.
And I like to see that it seems like we're kind of building that confidence back. I think this actually tells us that we're kind of building that confidence in our community back. And that is probably the most important thing to me in this presentation, besides what we're going to be talking about in a minute for the bond, but I like to see that, so.
Well, I know I've been dismissed, but I will say we've been tracking this over several districts, but also have done the poll for this district for several years. And I will say that credibility, the overall quality of the district has stayed pretty steady, but I will say the overall confidence with what's going on within the district has increased year over year for the last couple of years.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, do we have no public comments, Amy? Okay, we're just gonna move on past that. And we are gonna move on to our action items. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of the fiscal year 2023 budget revision number 3, presented by Executive Director Michael Vaughn.
Madam President, members of the governing board, at this time, I ask you to consider approving the budget revision I presented on earlier tonight.
I'm just gonna go through and see if anybody had any additional questions before we move on. Ms. Clymer,
No questions.
Mr. Honak,
No questions.
Mr. Owens, Ms. Moran.
No questions.
I have no questions either, so I will entertain a motion.
I move to, oh gosh. Approve the adoption. Oh my gosh. No, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one, excuse me. I move to approve the fiscal year 2023 budget revision number 3 as presented.
I will second.
Having a first and a second, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran.
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Next, we will move on to item B, which is consideration and possible adoption of a resolution ordering and authorizing all matters necessary for a bond election to be held on November 7th, 2023. This will also be presented by Executive Director Michael Wong.
Madam President, members of the governing board, at this time, I ask you to consider voting on calling for an election to ask for authorization for the bond program we've discussed tonight and in previous study sessions.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any comments or questions before?
I don't have any questions. I do have one comment. I'm not sure that we'll have a lot of discussion tonight, but I do just want to say thank you to Executive Director Vaughn. Over the last couple of meetings, we've had really good presentations, and I think we've given the community, staff, whoever, a chance to reach out to us. And I've had some questions personally. So just want people to know that while there might not be in-depth conversations tonight, there has been over the last several meetings because of the information that we've gotten over time. So thank you for that, but I don't have any questions.
Mr. Honak,
No questions. Good job.
Mr. Owens.
Are we voting on this right after?
We're not, yeah, we will be after this, after your questions or comments. So if you had any comments you wanted to make
Yeah,
about it.
I don't have
you
any,
can
I don't have any questions. Comment wise, we had a presentation last board meeting by the group that went around and checked the facilities of every single building. That was very telling. We have a lot of aging buildings. We have immediate needs. I've also been able to get to several campuses on some of the showcases, and we have students who are in the library as a classroom, right? Growth, Paul talked about how growth, isn't a big issue. I think a lot of people are frustrated with growth, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. For somebody who's lived in the West Valley my entire life, I kind of hate a lot of this growth, but that doesn't mean it's stopping. So we have to stay ahead of it, and we're behind it. So I don't like paying taxes if I don't have to, but at the same time, I don't like seeing students in libraries and children without maybe chairs for a little bit of time just because of where they're sitting. So I'm going to wait to cast my vote, but if anybody wants to go to the LESD website, look at my email, send me an email if you don't understand or want to visualize what it's like in some of these classrooms and campuses that need repairs and need the money for this bond. Shoot me an email and we'll make it happen.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I agree with Board Member Owens. I don't take this decision lightly. This is, asking our local constituents to pay money to support our buildings and buses and our operations, and as well as a new school, which, to Board Member Owens' point, we do need based on the capacity and overcapacity that we're at some of our campuses. And we have looked at options. We are in the process of adding some portables to a couple of our campuses to help mitigate the overcrowding that we have right now. So again, with all of the previous discussions that we've had, I feel that this bond is unavoidable. And of course, the decision will be in the hands of our registered voters in the district. But as a board, this is a prudent decision that I think needs to be made.
Thank you. I will just say that while I wish we didn't have, I wish the state would fund our repairs and things that we need to have done. They're not doing that right now. And one of the good things actually about a bond is how our community gets to decide what they want to invest in our local schools. And so we know that we're growing in the West Valley like crazy. Like Mr. Owen said, we have several classrooms that have to be in a library. Kids don't get to use their library. And this isn't happening just at one campus, it's at multiple campuses. We had the presentation about all the repairs that need to be done on our campuses immediately in the next couple of years and long-term that we want to make sure that we can do. And so it is critical that our district community comes together to support these schools. And so I think that this bond is something that's super important. So I'm glad that we are having this conversation before we have our schools that are so over capacity that we're having to send them somewhere else potentially. So I'm glad that we're talking about this, and I hope that our community is going to support us as we move forward. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the resolution ordering for a bond election to be held on November 7th, 2023.
I will second.
Having a motion and a second, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer? Yay. Mr. Honak?
I guess I think I'm a yay based on the presentations that in the net effect is it's not really going to increase taxes. So it's yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
I am also a yay. Motion passes. Next up on the agenda is the discussion and approval of the revised district organizational chart for 2023-2024 school year and job description edits and salary placements. This is actually going to be presented by our incoming new superintendent, Dr. Carter Davidson.
All right. Good evening, President Zeidman, members of the board, Superintendent Gunning and team, and community members as well. Thank you for giving me the opportunity tonight to present hopefully something you see as just a positive outcome for our Litchfield Elementary future. So that is looking at our district organizational chart. And as President Zeidman said, my name is Carter Davidson, and I'm certainly glad to be here this evening. So as we look at the information provided to the board and to the community, the org chart is being presented as possible change certainly applies and connects supports to all pillars of our current strategic plan. We hope that this revised organizational chart will certainly allow us to respond quickly and respond appropriately to not just this strategic plan, but to our future plan as well. And as I continue the presentation, I also just want to say thank you to the current team of LESD administrators. This was a plan that and a conversation that was put in place before I also began working alongside them. So I just want to tell them thank you as well. Here is our current plan, and I just wanted to make certain that our board remembers what it looks like and how it's currently positions are allocated. This was approved by the governing board in August of 2022, and this plan demonstrates that there's 2 executive directors that are split between both instructional and operational duties. That's just want to make certain we had that as a reference point. As we look to a possible change, certainly we provided you some insight on the rationale as to why we are considering it. What we know to be true is that the structure we're presenting for tonight as a possible change is that Litchfield has had a very lean administrative team, and we want to align also our efforts to other districts as we think about future growth, to use that term. We also want to talk about efficiencies, and what we know is that an organizational structure such as the one we're presenting could be supportive. We are not requesting additional FTE. We're just simply asking for the board to allow us to be more efficient and more strategic with our people. Also, our intent is to reduce the silos. As you saw in the previous picture, the way it is built, we hope that now by separating a few of the items out and being able to provide some energy in the operations area, that'll be helpful and allow us to again be more strategic in supporting of our classrooms and in more particular our schools. A couple other important pieces as we talk about stakeholder groups and ensuring that we can respond appropriately. The new structure will allow us to consider those different stakeholder groups in the decision making for large decisions. We know that we want all decision makers to be at the table. We want them to be represented. For me personally, I see this as a form of customer service, that when we are asked to make decisions, not only are we timely, but also we keep everybody in mind when we do it. And I think lastly, having dedicated areas of responsibility across those different columns should allow us to, again, focus on the operations as a whole, but also ensure that our district stakeholders get the response that they need. And certainly, I should have also said, I'm moving rather rapidly just because of time, but if there's any questions you have during the presentation, feel free to stop me as well. Wanted to provide a picture of our proposed organizational chart, and I think you had that in the packet of information. You will see that the gold areas, in particular areas that would report directly to the superintendent as part of cabinet. Again, making certain that all individuals that need to be in a making decisions are at the table together. You'll see some of the items at the bottom connected to the Executive Director of Human Resources, as well as to the potential Executive Director of Communication Partnerships. Some of the new and refined responsibilities for those individuals. And also you'll see the significant change would be to have the Chief Financial Officer title instead of the current Executive Director for Finance with some additional responsibilities connected there. Some other changes you will also see is a change of title, the Director of Curriculum being titled the Director of Teaching and Learning, as well as the Director of School Safety in this particular change, reporting directly to the Deputy Superintendent. An important piece that we'd like to highlight on that is just simply that now under Dr. Doozy as a proposal, the Director of Safety would have a direct correlation to our schools, keeping them connected is something we felt would be very important. Something to highlight here, and I made reference to that earlier, a lean staffing model also is demonstrated in our most recent Arizona Auditor General's Office report, where per pupil expenditures for administration in Litchfield Elementary is lower than normal. And so there is an additional cost, as you see demonstrated here, roughly $47,000 to support the movement within our organizational chart. And I also, I was going to give you some more information, but I did share the changes. What we do know to be true, and I appreciate some of the board member questions earlier around this, is that we do have some net change in positions due to some individuals moving into other areas outside of Litchfield Elementary, and then knowing we'd be hiring typically at a lower level than where those employees already are. That's how we're able to demonstrate the lower cost as it relates to the change in the org chart. So with that said, and again, it's a little after 8 and you've done a great job staying focused. I'm here to answer any questions you may have regarding this proposed change, and certainly thank you for your time.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
No questions. You addressed any of the questions that I had before. I will say that I think several of us have been through this before when Superintendent Gunning did this, and it's probably never easy coming in and your first job is reorganizing everybody that you haven't actually worked with yet. So I appreciate the thought and concern in going into this. And I think this looks really, it looks really good. I think one thing that we have seen, I'm really interested in seeing how the sort of executive director of operations goes. That's always been tough as you're intermingling curriculum and teaching and learning and other things with operational things. We've had several conversations between administration and the board about how to properly handle that over the years or whatever. So I'm interested to see this model and how it works, and excited to see some of the folks that have been working really hard get the titles they deserve. So thank you.
Mr. Honak?
I'm very impressed. The previous organizational charts, just to me, things it just didn't seem to fit together. And I think it achieves all of your rationale, the bullet points in the previous slide. And when I look at this org chart and whatever, it seems to have a real logical sense of how things are divided really into two major things. They really are. And so, you know, I mean, you can look at it deeper and deeper, but everything I see, I don't see anything that looks like it doesn't really fit in and is very logical. So, and it certainly sounds to me like it's more efficient in that it's going to have a clear kind of chain of command that's going to avoid what I think have been some problems, at least in some areas, you know, definitely like in transportation and other areas, stuff like that. That was a big concern here. And I could see things like that fitting in a lot better. So, I mean, yeah, this looks really good. It sounds like everybody and yourself, it looks like a good plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, works for me if it works for you.
Thank you.
Ms. Moran?
Yes, so I think the org chart looks good. As we've discussed here many times before, the governing board's role is to hire the superintendent and the superintendent's role is to hire everybody else. So I'm happy to take your recommendation. I'm really pleased to know that you worked with the current administration together and collaborated to come up with this org chart. I think that's the best way to do things going forward. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we certainly can tweak that and have some improvements going forward. So yeah, I think it looks great.
I don't have any questions either, but I do want to thank you for the time you've put into this since we hired you, and also working with all of our administrators we have currently to come up with a plan that everybody feels good about. And in any organization, when you have a new leader, they're going to just have a different take. So I definitely am not trying to knock our previous organization chart. It's just everybody's going to play to their strengths. And so I appreciate you coming up with this plan with your team. And I think it looks fantastic. So thank you.
We appreciate that as well. And so certainly we respectfully request the governing board approve the proposed district organizational chart for 2024, as well as the job description amendments and the placement charts that were amended as well. Thank you.
If anyone would like to make a motion.
I move to approve the revised district organizational chart for 23-24, as well as the job description edits and salary placements as presented.
I second.
Okay, having a motion and a second, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran.
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson, for your first presentation to the board.
And your first successful vote, and you don't even officially work here yet. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
Next, we are going to move on to the consent agenda. I'm going to go through and see if anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to pull off of consent. Ms. Clymer.
I have one question on item 9P. And I believe there was a request to pull something else off. So other than that, no, I don't.
Okay, Mr. Honak.
No, nothing to pull out.
Mr. Owens,
Nothing on my end.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, I have a comment on item 9D, gifts, grants, and bequests, and I would like to remove item 9R regarding the contracted bus drivers.
Okay. I would like to pull off item 9G from the consent agenda. If you want to ask your question, Ms. Clymer and Ms. Moran, then we can approve consent and then move into discussion on the others.
Sure thing. Let's see, let me scroll down just one second. Item 9P is the approval of community use of facilities handbook and fee schedule for 23-24. My question is not necessarily on the handbook itself, but after reading through it, I don't have any questions on the changes or the updates, but it touches on that we have long-term use agreements on specific fields or things like that, where organizations or whatever contract with us over a long period of time. As the board, we've received some feedback recently from someone, and also a few other community members have reached out to me in regards to what I would consider, I think, a long-term use fee. So my question is, what is the responsibility of the district, and what is the responsibility of somebody who does a long-term use agreement with us in regards to maintenance of that facility, whether it be a field or what have you? Whose responsibility is it to maintain, and is it per contract or is it different every time? I'm looking at you, Director Vaughn. I'm not sure if it's you or maybe Dan, I apologize, but.
I think both of us can answer it in to a certain extent. So those long-term agreements are unique. And so a unique contract has been written in each case. Now, I will say from my review of those contracts, since I took my position, what I've noted is that the reason the school district was interested in entering those agreements, it appears, is because those groups were willing to at least contractually take on some of the burden of maintaining those facilities. As far as the actual result of that, that's a little bit different, but it is set based on the contract, and it appears that the reason for that is a shared responsibility for maintenance, or in some instances being pushed more directly to that community group.
Okay, fantastic. So basically per contract or per facility, it's determined once that contract is negotiated. Okay, I will follow up with my specific concerns since they are individual and we don't need to discuss individual contracts here, but I'll follow up with you, Director Ensign. Thank you.
Ms. Moran, your question or sorry, your comment.
Yes, I have a comment on item 9D, gifts, grants, and bequests. So I love to read this part of the consent agenda because on more months, more often than not, we have some really significant support that we get from business partners in our community. And this month, I just want to highlight that the Southwest Human Development and Candlin, which is a not-for-profit that supports early childhood development, donated over $136,000 of learning items, center supplies, musical instruments, play sets, sensory items to our schools. And so I just wanted to highlight that and give a specific thank you to those two organizations for their support of early childhood development.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. If there's no other questions, then I will move to approve the consent agenda minus 9G certified personnel resignations, release of contract, non-renewals, and 9R approval of award contract number 24004 contracted bus drivers for student transportation as presented.
I'll second.
Having a motion and a second, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Honak?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. We will move on to items pulled from the consent agenda. We will start with item 9G. I asked to pull this off because we were notified that we had a resignation that wanted to withdraw their resignation. So can I just move to approve it minus that? Okay, so I would like to just move that we approve that item minus Carol Klein.
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
Okay, so we had a staff member who had sent a letter of resignation in that had requested that they be able to withdraw that resignation. So since we had not approved it yet, they were able to send in something to let us know they wanted to do that. But now, since it's after the 24-hour period, it's not in consent anymore the way it is. So we have to approve it by itself.
Understood. Thank you.
So there's a motion. If I can get a second.
I'll second that.
Having a motion and a second, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Honak?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Next, we will move on to item 9R. Ms. Moran, you asked us to pull this off, so can you let us know your comments or questions?
Yes, so I have requested to pull this item off of the consent agenda for two reasons. The first reason is strictly the dollar amount. I feel like this is too high of a threshold for us to not have a discussion around it. The amount of this contract is $800,000. So I would like us to make sure that we all have an understanding as to what this contract is actually going to do. And I believe that question would really be best answered by Executive Director Vaughn. And then I also would like just a general overview and update on the current bus driver transportation department. As we know and have had previous discussions, we're having some struggle filling and consistently providing bus transportation. So I'd like to hear more about where we are in that process and how this contract is potentially going to help with that.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yeah, this award is the end result of a request for proposal process that was started with governing board approval, seeking out industry partners who may be able to provide us with contracted student transporters. These contracted transporters would be interviewed by the district prior to starting and would drive district provided school buses. The pricing provided under these contracts are by day and allow for flexibility. If the district's able to fill these roles with district employees, we can pull back on the contracting arrangements. We recognize that this is one piece of the longer term strategy to address our concerns with transportation. Just to put numbers on it. So when I looked a couple days ago, we had 18 student transporter vacancies. With these awards, if we move forward with it, the two industry partners have, between the two of them, have offered to provide 11 student transporters. This would be a significant move forward in being able to staff our transportation department and be able to provide more consistent transportation to our community and our families. We're also moving towards, that broader update that Governing Board Member Moran asked for, we're also working with industry experts on developing a longer-term plan moving forward. This includes transportation experts at the trust, our insurance company, that they have a handful of transportation experts that really serve as the transportation experts for most of the school districts in Arizona. And we are also working with some of our sister school districts in the community to get the support that the team needs in the meantime. But as we're working forward, as we're working towards implementing that longer term plan and to really address that root cause, contracts like this one are a good solution to, again, be able to provide that more stable transportation solution to our families.
Okay, so what I think I hear you saying is, number one, this contract is flexible. We're not tied into this full amount. We will use this as needed, although we initially plan to utilize it to the max. Correct? Okay. And then number two, utilizing this contract will potentially cut our number of open positions in half or more.
If we are able to interview their candidates and find them to be good matches for our needs, then yes.
Okay, so the intent is that this contract will help to ensure that the buses will run as expected with fewer exceptions in the coming school year.
That's always the goal, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
I have, go ahead if I could. I will admit I don't know the going rate for a contracted transportation worker. So maybe this question is out of turn, but mathematically, it seems that $800,000 up to $800,000 for 11 employees seems high. Now, if they were using their own buses, so we weren't getting the wear and tear and the gas and all that kind of stuff on our buses, I could see that making more sense. But if they're utilizing our equipment, so we're still having that cost, that it seems high for only 11 employees. Am I misunderstanding how that comes together?
So the 800,000 is a little bit elevated in case those contracted companies are able to provide a few more employees. If you give me just a second, I want to pull something up. One of the things I looked at in evaluating if this contract was a good idea, beyond obviously our vacancies and how this would move us forward in filling those, is that additional cost above and beyond if we were able to fill those roles with our own employees. Because that $800,000 amount is a little bit elevated in case they are able to provide more. These numbers may not make complete sense, but when I calculated out the additional cost above and beyond, if we were able to hire the 11 just as district employees, is much closer to $230,000. So to put that into some degree of perspective, we're basically paying a premium of $230,000 above what it would cost if we could fill these positions internally. That being said, it's very common to pay a premium when you're having to contract. We're seeing that same behavior and activity in our special education department in areas where we're having to contract it out. That's why earlier in the agenda tonight, you saw me having to shift some budget capacity from salaries and benefits to contracted. It's a sad reality that just contracting out regularly is more expensive than having our own employees. That's why this is not the long-term solution. That's why this is just a short-term solution as we work towards that longer-term plan.
Is the responsibility of these transporters, monitors, whatever positions these will hold, the same as employees that work for LASD directly? Meaning we've had previous conversations. We just had one in our last school showcase about contracted employees. And one of the benefits to contracted employees, as you mentioned in the special ed department, is that they have different levels of responsibilities. They're not a direct employee of ours. And so we can only ask them to do so many things. Is that the case here as well? And if so, does that put even more pressure on the precious few that we do have? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I mean, if it is what it is, we need these people. I understand that. I'm not trying to be combative. I'm just wondering, is there going to be some other sort of residual consequences of this because now they have less responsibility, they're getting paid more money, and then our employees, we're gonna go to all contract workers because ours aren't going to want to stay because they have to do more of the work.
I don't believe that will be the case. The pricing provided in these responses are a daily rate for the work that's needed. If it does go above and beyond your standard routes, and we ask these employees to do additional items above and beyond what's covered by the contract, there are hourly rates that we can pay if we so desire to put that additional work on them. I think the hope would be, though, that you set up these contracted employees running standard routes, both for the benefit of our internal team so that they know they can rely on it, but also for the benefit, and probably even more importantly, for the benefit of our families and students, because you want, whether those student transporters are our direct team members or if they're through these partnerships with industry partners, you want our families to have a consistent face where able, picking up their child in the morning, dropping them off. As we've said before in other presentations, these student transporters are very often the first people that greet our students in the morning and start their Litchfield experience, and they're also the last one that end the day. And so we don't want to have that inconsistency. And so the hope is that whether the student transporters or our direct team members or contracted, that we can provide that stability.
Executive Director Vaughn, if I could also add and just add to what you said, that we have 2 current members of our team that are contracted through Beeline, and they have all of the same routes or the same requests in the same daily schedule as our other drivers. And so they also do turnarounds at our middle schools. So they have been great employees, but also have been asked to do exactly what our current staff members do.
Great, thank you for the information.
Mr. Honak, did you have any questions about this?
No, it's just reality here. We gotta fix some things around here like our transportation department, but until then.
Mr. Owens,
No questions. Thank you.
did you have any more questions, Ms. Moran?
No, thank you.
The only statement I want to make is that I don't believe that Executive Director Vaughn would bring us this $800,000 request if he didn't absolutely think we needed it, because he's told us how we have to cut $3 million later in a couple years or in a year out of our budget. So I trust you, Executive Director Vaughn, if you bring this to us and say that we need this to move forward with this. So that being said, if someone would like to make a motion.
I will move to approve the award contract number 24004, contracted bus drivers for student transportation as presented.
I will second.
Having a motion and a second, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran.
Yay.
I am also a yay, and motion passes. I'm going to have us take a 2-minute break. I don't even know. If everyone wants to get back to their places, we can get back to the meeting. Okay, guys, we are going to get started on our meeting so we can get this wrapped up. We just have a few more items left. Let's see if we can get this done before 9 o'clock. Okay, next up on the agenda is the Arizona School Board Association political agenda for the 2024 legislative session. I guess this is going to be presented by me. Board members, in the board docs, there was a list of a bunch of potential political agenda items. Basically, what we're supposed to do as a board, those of us that are here, besides Ryan Owens have done this before, but for Mr. Owens, is we just kind of go through this and pick our top 5 to 7 items that we think are important for us. And we put them forward to ASBA, and then ASBA takes all that information that they get from all the school boards, and then they put together a idea of what they want to do with moving forward. And it gets presented at their annual meeting or the law conference. I can't remember which one. And then our delegate, which would be Mr. Owens, goes and votes based on what the board decided they wanted and whether or not we as a board want to support their political agenda or not. I'm going to ask Mr. Owens if he has any questions about it first before we get started, because the rest of us have done it before, but this is new to you. So if you had any questions for us about it or.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the concept. Do we have to participate? I mean, we are ASBA members.
We
apparently.
are ASBA members, so I think it's important that we put our voice forward of what it is that we feel is important.
Well, I asked this question last time. When do we reaffirm or reapprove or whatever our membership?
That is a great question. Superintendent Gunning or Amy, I don't know who could tell us that.
Well, can I ask the question? Do you have an interest in changing our membership status with ASBA?
No, not necessarily as far as, no, I'm interested in, I literally read every single one of these, prior to, not just like skimmed, I read every single one of these. And so, I've worked at the Capitol. I was a policy advisor for a governor for 2 years. I met with lobbyists. I met with, political groups. I met with non-political groups, and right, everybody has agendas. Everybody has asks. Obviously, in this position, and us as as educators and things like that, education is a top priority. We wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. That being said, when you are lobbying the legislature, or when you're working with different advocacy groups, there's only so much of a state pie that can be distributed certain ways. And so when you ask certain things, when you want certain things, usually it's not just, okay, just like we have a budget, right? We have our budget for our school, and Michael helps us know exactly how much money we have to spend. That's the same at the state level. And so when you're taking some money from one, if ASBA is asking for money for a certain action item or something that they feel is a priority, where does that money come from? If, you know, if it does get approved, and that's up to the legislature, obviously, to balance the budget and to come up with a budget that will eventually get signed by the governor. So I just kind of was wondering what, looking at all these, I think obviously a lot of these they make sense. I don't know that September 6th or whatever that date is, or September 9th, when they meet to vote and the ASBA approves 5 or however many items it is. I don't know if, and that's why there's this process, but I don't know if what the ASBA is willing or wants to put forward for us to then be in support of accurately reflects the priorities and goals of the majority of people within our boundaries of Litchfield Elementary School. And that's not, we want education to be funded, or we want certain things, teacher pay, stuff like that. There's a lot of variables, and I would like to see, and I don't know if they've hired yet, the new executive director of the ASBA, because I know that she resigned, so she's retired. So I'm interested to see who fills that position. But you know, this is a non-partisan entity that, in my experience, and is not so nonpartisan sometimes. So I just have some information. I just had some interest in that, but I don't have any objection to the way this is being rolled out, or what the, you know, I don't object to this, I guess. I just I mean, I guess you voted me for the delegate, right? Remember that? So
We did do that.
but we're not voting on anything right now, right? This is just,
So today we are picking our 5 to 7 that we want to put forward as a board, that we all decide as a board are our priorities to then send to ASBA so that they can then put that together for a finalized agenda that will be presented in September. I mean, was there anything in there that was like, yes, this is something I could get behind for you, Mr. Owens?
there's like 97 bullets.
Well, yes.
So I guess, yeah, so I guess I wasn't under, so we don't have to do that today. It's due,
We do have to do it today because we
let's
have
say
to,
it's May 24th.
well, yes, when is our, I guess technically we have a meeting on May 23rd, right?
So I didn't know that today we were telling R5.
I apologize. That is my fault for not getting in contact with you prior to the meeting.
Yeah, we do have a study session on the 23rd. So, I mean, I guess I still think I'm in favor for at least discussing it tonight and putting out some ideas, but potentially we could then take them back as individual board members and then bring it back for a final vote on the 23rd. Could that work?
Yeah, because I believe that's going to be a special meeting anyways. So if we want to do that,
I don't want to stifle like.
no, it's
discussion
totally
tonight.
fine. So yeah, we
I
should
was
talk
not
about.
prepared. Like I said, I read
That
every
is
single bullet.
100% my fault. I apologize for not reaching out to you sooner. I'm very sorry about that. If anyone, Danielle, Ms. Clymer, would you like to share some of yours for now, just to kind of think about, and then you can also think about what you might want, and we can talk about this further on the 23rd.
Yeah, I want to address a couple of things because I hear what you're saying, and I've learned a little bit about ASBA over the years. Some things, obviously, like any organization, some things you like, some things you might do differently or whatever. So I can definitely get behind that. One thing I do want to bring up, even though we're talking about their political agenda tonight, I don't want us to forget all of the other components of being members of ASBA do for us. Their policy updates, their legal guidelines, a lot of their communication strategies, things like that, that they provide to us as benefits of members to me are invaluable. right? We don't have a legal staff or don't have the money to pay our current legal staff to research policy and create those for us as board members to approve based on the ever-changing bills that are going through the legislature. So that alone to me is worth the membership, but I understand what you're saying in terms of the political part of it. I think there are very few things today that are truly 100% nonpartisan on either side of the line. So I get that. I hear that. I agree. But I think there's other benefits I don't want us to forget about that come with being a member of ASBA that are at least really important to me. And I know our staff members that rely on some of those things. So I'll leave that there and we can look more into the membership later on when it's time for renewal. In terms of the political agenda, I look at it, and maybe I'm wrong, and I think your experience sort of being in that more lobbying world and how this works, maybe you can explain it to us. But the way that I look at it, one of the ones that I think we've done this year after year, but, again, it's not like based on budget constraints or based on whatever, we're just going to check this off this year and move on. I mean, these things have been on this list for, gosh, however long I've been doing this. But, one of the ones in the top bucket here, adequately and equitably fund district schools, whatever, in the second column on the right-hand side, eliminate unfunded mandates and administrative burdens. That's pretty huge. I don't think anyone's going to say, oh, by next year, we've done that. We've completed that. Absolutely not. But I do want, in my opinion, I do want ASBA fighting every time a new bill comes up. When they say this is yet another unfunded mandate, it doesn't really matter what the bill is. If they know that districts like ours and us across the state can't handle one more unfunded mandate, I want them fighting for that, despite what side of the political spectrum we're on. So that's kind of the way I looked at it. I'm trying to pick things that aren't partisan based, but are more specific to Litchfield and what's important to our staff, what's important to, teaching our students and supporting our families. So I hope I'm looking at that the right way, but that's the way that I look at it, more broader scope. We're certainly not going to complete these things in a year, but if we can at least get people to look at the things that are important to us, maybe that's the win that we're looking for. So that's one of the ones, eliminate unfunded mandates. Another one, and preserve and strengthen local control. Oppose legislation that intends or lessens the legal authority of us as a school board to approve curriculum. I think that we are a locally elected or appointed board for a reason, and we need to be able to approve what we think is best for our students. I'm not sure that any one person or entity could approve that kind of stuff for statewide. I don't want to see that happen personally. I don't think that's what's good for our district and what's good for our students. On the second page, in terms of public accountability and taxpayer dollars, establish financial and academic transparency for all institutions and individuals that accept public funds. I think we have heard time and time again from our own constituents and others that it is important that not only us, but all public schools continue to be transparent. I think we need to strive for more of that, specifically in public funds as we do bonds, overrides. How is that money used? We just heard the communication strategist this evening talk about how people want to know more about how the budget works and all of that. So I think continuing to push for that from the top down, from not only us, but all school districts around, I think is super important and something that our constituents can certainly get behind. Under school security and safety and security at the bottom, I don't know exactly what this entails, but I'm interested to know more about how this would work, is providing funding to individual districts to implement locally directed school safety programs, as well as mental health and well-being initiatives. I think we just heard Mr. Benson, we all know this, how important school safety is. If there is initiatives or funding or some type of mechanism that could help us achieve what we need to via our safety concerns, whether we pass this bond or not, we will always have additional safety concerns that we wish that we could address. If we had an ability from the state level to earmark specific dollars to do that, that's of significant interest to me. I think it's of significant interest to our constituents, certainly to our students and their families. So I would start there, and at least just to open the conversation, those are the things that stuck out to me. And Ryan, I agree with you. There's 17 more on here that would be great choices. It's not like we disagree with any of them, but I think specifically in things that we are going through right now, those things seem top of mind for me.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, I'm happy to highlight the items that I would prioritize as well. And I think I have a similar kind of mindset to Board Member Clymer as far as I look at which of these bullet points would help our district and our constituents the most. So that's where I prioritize it. Some of these bullets don't even apply to our district. If they apply to a rural district, that's not us. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say we shouldn't support what ASBA is doing. This is our opportunity to tell ASBA what we need in our district and let them be our voice, one of our representatives to the folks that are making the laws. So I'll start with, I have two under basically the funding category, which probably is not a surprise. Maximize state funding for competitive salaries to attract, recruit, and retain talented teachers and staff. The second bullet point, I would like to highlight that one as well. Revise the school finance formula to provide stable and dedicated revenue source, capital funding, et cetera. Those are my two top in the funding categories. I would like under the local control to change the override budget increase language to better reflect what voters are being asked to support. This language is confusing. It's been confusing for years. It's something that we just passed, so we don't really have to worry about it for a few years, but it would be fantastic if they would revise it to make sense to the ordinary voter of what they're actually being asked to do. On the second page, improving outcomes for all students, I would love to see more policy that recognizes, respects, and promotes teaching as a profession. I think that's really important to our district. We respect our teachers and we support our teachers, but that is not necessarily true at the state level. Under the accountability, which of course I'm also a huge fan of, I would like to see established financial and academic transparency for all institutions and individuals that accept public funds. I don't think we should be held to a higher standard than anyone else who are receiving those funds, and everyone should have the opportunity to know how those funds are being spent. Those are my five. But I'm not married to any of them. For me, those are my top. So I'm happy to hear your input, Board Member Zaidema or President Zaidema, and then if we want to revisit this later after Board Member Owens has additional time to have some input as well, that's great.
Mine are basically between your two already. The unfunded mandates was a big one for me, and providing funding to implement locally directed school safety programs was a big one, especially after looking at what we saw from our community for our bond survey that they just did. Obviously, that's clearly an important issue for our community, so we should advocate for that at a state level as well. But most of these things, I'm not married to any of these just because I mean, I could get on board with any of these, most of them. So I would love to hear your feedback, Mr. Owens, just as somebody new and hasn't gone through this process before, what you're thinking. And we can definitely come back to this on the 23rd.
Yeah, no, I agree with most of these, right? I mean, these are easy. This isn't like me saying, I don't agree with this stuff. We shouldn't. I didn't know we were supposed to have 5 tonight, but I think it's more of I'm very, very happy with us finding 5 and saying, here we go, ASBA, this is what LESD wants, right? My issue would be then if, on a larger scale, because what's our 5 priorities may not be the 5 priorities that ASBA deems as the most appropriate moving forward for us then to be tied to. And so anytime, you're right, this ASBA, I went to the new board member orientation and they have webinars and they have amazing resources. And I actually went to law school with the general counsel for ASBA. Great guy, great human being, a lot of benefits. But when you're tied to an association that speaks on your behalf, then you're tied to them, right? Once they speak. And so if they're out advocating for things that I don't feel like represents either LESD or its constituents, then I have a problem with that at that point in time. So I think I can get you my 5, maybe even, end of the week or something like that, if that helps, but I'm not ready to pick 5 right now.
That's totally fine. So let's move this. We will table this vote till the 23rd, and then we can come back and pick our 5 then to send in. And again, I'm really sorry that I didn't talk to you about this before, but we do have time, so it works out. And I think once they do this, they'll send us a draft of what they're looking at that we can then look at as a board again before you go and represent us as our delegate. So we will be able to talk about that and say, yes, we do, no, we don't. Here's things we don't like in there. And then you could go as our delegate with that in mind. And then if they're doing things that we as a board don't agree with, I think that's a conversation we have. If that comes up, I definitely think we bring that back and we talk about it. If they're doing something that we're just not in support of and doesn't represent us as a district and our community.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's a very large organization, and I absolutely agree if they are doing something that we fundamentally don't agree with, that's the discussion that we have. Absolutely. Whether it's, representing us in a political situation or responding to other situations that may come up or whatever they have. I'm in agreement with that. So once this is finalized, we can come back and look at that. I will just say I do disagree that because we are a member of this organization that they speak for us. We speak for LESD. So just because we are a member of them for all of these benefits doesn't necessarily mean that we don't get to disagree. We do get to disagree. We do get to say here in front of everyone that we don't necessarily agree with this, but we do agree with all of these things. So, I just want to make sure that just because we disagree on one thing doesn't mean that we need to completely disestablish ourselves from the relationship. Now, granted, all of that has varying levels. So there's relevancy to that. I will agree. That's a fair point. So
No, you're accurate. And a lot of this, and like I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's not a fundamental difference, right? When you're looking at, and we had it with us when we're saying, do we do, specials for 35 hours at what cost? Where are we going to get that $300,000, $500,000, $600,000 from? So while I mentioned at the very beginning, we are trying to advocate for, teachers and students and all that stuff. While we operate here, we don't live in a bubble or like a silo. So there's things that the legislature makes decisions on budgetary wise and financially that impact a lot of other areas of our life. And so to sometimes, and at the end of the day, the legislature is going to make the determination, right? But I'm just interested in my first experience dealing with this process of just kind of how it plays out. And so while I'm not closing, I'm just going to be more not cautious, but just I'm interested to see how it plays out.
I think that's fair. So, okay. We don't have to do anything, right, Amy? We're just tabling that till next time. Okay. Perfect. We are going to move on to our next item, which is discussion of change to walk boundaries, 1 mile to 2 miles, and a first reading of revisions to policy EEAA walkers and riders. This is going to be presented by Dr. Doozy, and it is an information only presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, President and governing board members. I am going to present to you our proposal to look at our current policy for our transporting our students and ask the board to consider increasing the 2 mile radius for transporting students in our policy. That's the only change that we're requesting at this time. We would ask you to review this evening and make a decision by our next board meeting, which is May 23rd. I'm happy to answer any specific questions of the rationale of why we are making this request.
Ms. Clymer.
I don't have any questions. I think it's obvious why we have to do this. It's not something that we want to do, but I think it is in the best interest of our parents and families to have a consistent transportation route right now, some of which we cannot fill. We are working very hard to fill them, but I think not knowing whether you're going to have that transportation is a lot harder on families than knowing and making some permanent arrangements until we can get our transportation department back on our feet. So it is unfortunate, but necessary at this point. So thank you.
Mr. Owens.
Since you offered, just a really brief of why, please.
Absolutely.
Just for, if anybody hasn't heard or doesn't understand, I think it'd be helpful.
Absolutely. So currently we are not staffed full capacity for bus drivers. And so therefore, every time that we have any adjustments to make to staff, from staff being out sick, for, taking vacation days or personal days, anything like that puts extra stress and demands on our transportation department due to lack of staffing. When this happens, we have to make adjustments, and many times that adjustment is canceling a route. And that is after all other options have been exhausted, including bus drivers picking up second routes, really working collaboration. All of our office staff that has an active CDL are out driving, which has its negative ramifications on running a successful department. And so by allowing us to change the radius to 2 miles, we're able to communicate with parents that they need to provide their own transportation. I've had the opportunity to be at transportation and be on the receiving end of parent phone calls when we cancel buses. And honestly, they just want to know, is this going to be like this for the rest of the year? Because if it is, then I can make other arrangements. So being informed of what the transportation looks like is going to be a lot more helpful to our parents than having to last minute cancel each day. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I get it. It makes sense. It's unfortunate because, we just talked about how do we ask for more? Here we have the money. It's budgeted. We want to do it. We just don't have the ability to do it. And transportation has been a consistent issue. And 2 weeks ago or a month ago, we voted to give people who already were in the job more money for just coming to work. And so it's a sad reality that, the parents who are like, hey, go catch the bus, I'm off to work, to then all of a sudden find out from their kid, the bus got canceled. So what's the parent going to do? And so I do think providing that consistency so that doesn't happen is nice. It's unfortunate for some of those consistent bus routes that we do have. I hate the idea of, little kids maybe walking to school for 2 miles, but until we can fix this, hopefully we can get it back. But, we're talking about spending $800,000 for 11 or 12 or whatever temporary bus drivers. Like, it's super frustrating to even have to do this, but it is what we have to do, unfortunately. So I feel for anybody who's unfortunately affected by this and impacted this, but it's not our choice. It's not something we want to do.
I will comment that this is a short-term solution. This is not the way that we want the policy to be written permanently. So as we add these other drivers, and just like Executive Director Vaughn had mentioned that, hopefully these 11 drivers, we're going to interview them and vet them, make sure they're a good fit for LESD to drive our children. Once we add additional staff, then we can look at pulling that back, starting maybe with 1.5 to 2. Maybe moving it to 1.5. So it is definitely not a permanent solution. It's a solution that's needed right now until we can grow our transportation staff, which we will. I have hope we will. We have a lot of great people working on this. So.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, we have changed this policy back and forth numerous times in the past. I do not like changing this policy. In an ideal world, obviously, we would be at the 1 mile radius and we would have consistent and reliable transportation for our students, but that has just not been the reality for quite a while. So while I'm disappointed with the lack of transparency to the board with what has actually happened in the transportation department and with the mismanagement of that department, I am hopeful that we are on a good path now, that we will be able to correct course, and that this 2-mile radius will at least allow reliability and consistency and get us to a steady state to start the next school year, and then allow us to grow back into being the reliable student transportation system that we once were. So I am not opposed to this policy change as a temporary measure.
Thank you for bringing this to board so that we can then have it approved by the end of the school year so that we can share that information out with our families as soon as possible so that they can plan for next year. I know this is a difficult decision. This was a difficult decision for the board to make the last time we had to do it. None of us want to be doing it up here. Nobody more than me. It's really difficult for me to say yes to this when we are voting, but I understand the necessity of it. And I want to make sure that kids who are assigned bus routes are going to be able to get on the bus and get to school, and that kids that we can't, then their parents can just know that and they can plan and make arrangements. And I'm hoping that our communities in the schools can kind of work together at figuring out carpool situations so that we don't have little kinders walking to school 2 miles. So that's my hope for our community groups to help come together and help out in that way. And anybody who wants to be a bus driver, come apply to work for us because we pay well and we have benefits and we need you. So please come work for us. Okay, we are going to move on to our reports, last item on the agenda. We'll start with Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, this is a month of celebration, so it's a super exciting time. First of all, we celebrated today our Westside Impact Teacher and Principal of the Year at a breakfast at Grand Canyon University, so that was an amazing celebration. And tomorrow night, we will celebrate our Pride Award winners plus all of our retirees. Some retirees that I would like to point out as just a special shout out tonight, because I'm so grateful for all of their help, dedication, and passion over the years, is Gina DeCoste, for all of her hard work and dedication, not only starting off as a resource teacher, then principal, and also in our special education departments, and then executive director. She's been dedicated and has served Litchfield very, very well. And then also Miss Wendy Qualls won't officially retire until later in the year, but we didn't want to miss out on celebrating her. So grateful for her and all of her help and dedication through the years. And then John Scudder, which is going to be really angry that I'm actually even saying his name tonight. But John has just brought such a tremendous amount of compassion and leadership development, and he will truly be missed in the Litchfield district, along with Melissa McComb and Amber Mager, which makes up pretty much our special education leadership department. And they have grown our special ed program in a way that we are known nationally. So definitely we'll miss them. And then in addition to that, celebrated and had a great time at the Foundation Golf Tournament, which I took that day off to enjoy that day. And thank you to all of our board members and all of our staff members who did the same. And then also over the last week, I've been having the great pleasure of taking Dr. Davidson around to tour all of our amazing schools and amazing departments. So it's been a great time. Tomorrow we finish the tour. So thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move on to board reports next, and I am going to start with Ms. Moran today.
Okay. This month was a busy month, and I think the next couple of weeks are going to be possibly even busier, but it's all good. I had the privilege of going on 3 school tours, which we call school showcases: Verrado Middle School, Verrado Heritage, as well as Scott Libby. So spent some time primarily on the west side of the district. Thank you to Principal Peduano, Principal Noche, and Principal Fox for hosting me and the rest of the board for those tours. Super informative. I also appreciate the classroom teachers that let us come and at least get a sneak peek of some of the work that they're doing. Love to see Kagan in action. Love to see our students on their devices. Love to see iReady workbooks open. So yeah, it's just great to see all of those things in action when we're on the campus. I also had the opportunity of going to the A+ assembly at Rancho Santa Fe, which celebrated their A+ designation. It was super fun, energetic celebration of their hard work and dedication campus-wide. So not only the teachers and the staff, but also the students celebrating their success. Thank you to Principal Zuniga for modeling leadership to your students and staff. It was super fun. I also was able to go to the STEAM fair and was impressed, as always, with the creativity and applied scientific method that students utilize on their projects. Very special thank you to Mary Mahoney for her years of dedication to spearheading this event and making it a big success. The last event I want to highlight is the Litchfield Educational Foundation Golf Tournament that I sponsored and had the honor of playing in as well. It was a beautiful day for an excellent event and an even better cause to celebrate our outstanding teachers and staff at the Pride Awards, which will be held tomorrow night. So I'm looking forward to that. On a related note, I want to say Happy Teacher Appreciation Week to all of our teachers and staff and our administrators. I hope you feel the gratitude this week that's always below the surface, but sometimes us parents are too rushed or overwhelmed to express. So I'm going to close with lyrics from Natalie Merchant's song, Kind and Generous. You've been so kind and generous. I don't know how you keep on giving. For your selflessness, my admiration. For everything you've done, you know, I'm bound to thank you for it. So thank you, teachers, and very, very happy Teacher Appreciation Week.
Mr. Owens.
Thanks. I already talked a lot more than I normally do during these meetings. So three school showcases, Verado Heritage, Verado Elementary, and Scott Libby. Enjoyed those, getting to meet the principals, walk around the campuses, and go into some classrooms. Also, I attended the A+ assembly at Verado Middle School. I took my, Verado Elementary, yes.
Verado Middle School for the school tour, Verado Elementary for the A+.
I live there too. I took my 4-year-old though, and she was very excited to see her watch this giant assembly and watch Principal Jenke get silly stringed. She was loving it. And so watching her and watching all those students reminded me and just reaffirmed the decision that I made to run for this position and why we serve. Also played in the Foundations golf tournament. That was a great day. Got lucky, won the long drive hole. Small flex there, but yeah, just a busy month and looking forward to attending a couple of the promotions later on in the month.
Ms. Clymer.
You will get no flex here, especially as it relates to golf. So that is all, Mr. Owens. I will try to make this quick, but as Superintendent Gunning said, the end of the year comes with a lot of celebrations and a lot of thank yous and a lot of recognition. So I'll try to be quick. I think that I went to 4 school showcases this year. So for those of you in the audience or at home that don't know, school showcases as a board, the district administrators like to take us to every single campus every single year. So depending on, you know, campuses have things going on all the time. So we're trying to fit them in around their schedules, around our schedules and all of that. So trying to fit in all schools by the end of the year. So we get down to the end and we like to make sure that we see all of them. White Tanks Learning Center, extremely impressive. We got to interview some of their children and just phenomenal. I just can't wait to see where those students go moving into the new building next year. I'm super excited. Verado Middle School, Verado Heritage, impressive as always, amazing students, amazing staff, just the energy level of those schools is off the charts. Scott Libby, we were just there last week. New principal, lots of old staff members, and it seems like the balance between the two has just been seamless. So congratulations on that. There's a lot of amazing things happening on that campus. as Board Member Moran mentioned, the STEAM Fair. I actually was lucky enough to bring my two almost former LASD students to judge with me the science fair. As Kim mentioned, Mary Mahoney, who is a beloved member of the Mabel Paget community, but also I think LASD in general. She is the queen of science fair and has grown it from a very small project at Mabel Paget to now a district-wide STEAM fair. So kudos to her for all of the hard work. My kids have gone through her science fairs and she ignited a passion for that in my own children. So I can only imagine the impact that she's had on hundreds, if not thousands of students over her time here at LASD. So thank you. I think that STEAM Fair night was a complete success. I also attended the Rancho Santa Fe A+ celebration. Just wow, the enthusiasm and excitement and just the pride on those parents and students' faces was pretty amazing. As Ryan was saying, seeing your daughter in a school because, she hasn't gone to one of our schools yet, and just remembering why you did that. I completely agree. I mean, seeing families being proud of their school community, seeing children stand up and cheering because of their academic success. I mean, it's phenomenal. It is the reason that we do this. So thank you to Principal Zuniga and congratulations again to all of your staff. I was also lucky enough to spend some one-on-one time with Dr. Davidson. As we obviously seen tonight, he is a quasi-employee already. He is working hard and doing a lot of things. It was really interesting just to get to know him better, and he has such great ideas, and I think he's already developing priorities and some collaborations with our staff before his even official start date. So thank you. I'm excited to see what's yet to come. I wanted to say, this is our last, I feel like we still have a couple of weeks left to the end of the year, but this is our last official board meeting, before our students leave us for the year. So I just wanted to take a very quick second to say congratulations to our 8th grade students who are promoting to high school. We are so extremely proud of you and look forward to watching your continued success. Lucky enough, we will do that right here in the Agua Fria School District. The best is truly yet to come for you. So congratulations. We're very proud of you. And to all of our returning students, teachers, staff, our parents and families, we've made it. As a parent who's almost done with school year, I can honestly say that the exhale is coming. Another year's almost in the books, and I wish you a very relaxing summer, some rejuvenation time, hopefully, and we can't wait to have you back next fall. So.
Thank you. I will go next and try to also keep it short since we are past my 9 o'clock time, I said. We did have 4 school showcases, which seems like a lot in a month, but we did have 4. We did go to White Tanks, Verrado Middle School, Verrado Heritage, and Scott Libby. I will say that White Tanks, it might be my favorite one I've ever gone to. And this is nothing against every other school. I love them. They're great. Scott Libby knows it's got a place in my heart forever. Every campus has been wonderful, but White Tanks was really neat because they let us go around and talk to students, and we sat down and they answered our questions and they told us things about why they're there. They told us what their campus is like, what happens while they're there, what it looks like to transition back into a regular campus from White Tanks. And they were so honest with us and they were so understanding. They really knew why they were there and what they were working on and how they could get to where they wanted to get to. And I was just beyond impressed with every student, from the littles up to the bigs, and how they took care of each other. There was an older student with a younger student, and he really just kind of kept him on track while we were talking. And I was just so impressed with them. So thank you so much for that opportunity. I can't wait for them to get onto their new campus next year that is beautiful, and I'm excited for them to have that space moving forward. I also had the opportunity to attend the Avondale City Council meeting, where we had 2 students that were recognized by the City Council, one from Rancho Santa Fe and one from Corte Sierra, which I only knew about the Corte Sierra student when I attended, but while I was there, I got to find out, oh, we have another student from Rancho that's also. So that was a very cool experience for them. They all had their families there, and they were all excited to watch them go up there and get this certificate from the mayor. So it was a really neat experience for them. And I hope that teachers in those schools know about how they're able to do that in the future, because I think it'd be great to see our students recognized every time they have that opportunity, because they did recognize students from all the different districts in their city limits. And normally it's only one student from each district, but Litchfield's so amazing that they recognize two. So congratulations to those students that were recognized. I also was able to have a meeting with Dr. Davidson and get to know him a little better. I'm excited for what is coming for this district. I've had my weekly meetings with Superintendent Gunning, and I just want to take a minute to thank you for making this transition be so smooth going forward with Dr. Davidson. I think that that's setting him up for success, and it's going to keep our district on track to be successful. And I just appreciate your grace and your time that you've given this, and that you've made this a smooth transition for him, because I think that's super important. And that helps our district know that we are still a team here in this district and that we want to continue to be that. So I appreciate everything that you've done to help make that happen. I also was able to be a judge at the STEAM Fair, and there was really cool projects there, but I just have to give a shout out to my favorite project from a little 4-year-old that had a collection of sticks, because one of the categories is collections, and he had his collection of sticks. And I'm like, this is definitely done by a 4-year-old. No parent did this project for their kid. You know, they did this on their own, which makes it the best project, because you know, there's some projects in there by some first and second graders, and you're like, I think mom and dad did a lot of that, which is okay. It's still learning, but this 4-year-old definitely did the stick collection. So that was my favorite one. And everyone knows that the littles are my favorite. So I love that they did that. And I hope that they are always thinking like that in the world, that they just want to talk and share about their stick collection. I also was able to attend the golf tournament, where I understand we raised more money than we had budgeted to raise. So that's super exciting. This is a great foundation in our district that supports our students, our teachers in the Pride Awards every year. And I'm excited to attend the Pride Awards tomorrow to honor all of our winners that have been selected and to see how much money they're going to get as their prize. That's a very exciting thing as well. And lastly, last month, the board kind of distracted me with their nice comments. I don't do well with attention on me, so much so that it flustered me and it made me forget that I really wanted to thank my board, everyone on this board, because the superintendent search was a lot of work, and we had a brand new board member that came on at a crazy time where we asked way more of board members than we ever usually do. And he just jumped in and he did it, and everybody worked together. And I said from the beginning, I wanted us to come to a decision as unanimously as possible, because I felt that was important for our community to see that we were working as a group to find the best person. And we were able to do that by all working together and having conversations and being respectful to one another. So I appreciate all of you and all of the time you put into that to make that happen. And I think that we definitely made the right choice with Dr. Davidson. So I appreciate all of the time that everybody put into making that process happen. And with that, I'm done with my report for tonight. The only last thing, we have the reports from the administrators, which I appreciate everyone that sends those in. If there are schools that don't, please send them in to us, because we know that every campus is doing great things. And so it's nice to be able to read that and see that for sure. I appreciate the campuses that show the different things they're doing for assemblies and things like that. One of the things the communications person talked about is how at especially our Title I schools, how we need to get them there. We need to have the conversations with them in person. So I hope that our campuses are listening to that, and they're finding ways to bring our families onto the campuses and having those conversations with them, allowing them to be involved in different ways, because that's how we are going to gain their support. And that is how we're going to see our students become more successful, when we engage our families. So thank you to everyone that does turn in reports. We like reading them. I love having all the pictures. I also like looking at all the Facebook pages, and a lot of the stuff tends to be on their social media stuff too. So that's pretty cool. But with that, we are done with our meeting. So I will entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I will second.
Having a motion and a second, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
I am also